Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio. Welcome into a fanatic Friday. We are brought to you, the full-time fan, by Modelo. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. You can catch us on social at RE Sports, ARI Sports. I'm on social at James Westling. We've got Anthony Smith behind the scenes on the video side. T-Chain's over here producing exclusively on TuneIn. We'll be highlighting Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps with UCF today. They've actually had, low-key, a really nice portal so far during this cycle. Matt Murschel will join us from the Orlando Sentinel and Tribune here in this first hour. Then in hour number 2, Marshall Newhouse, former TCU great and NFL offensive tackle, because we highlight TCU and Iowa State today, part of our NFL draft preview series, and we'll be looking at offensive linemen. Good morning, sir. What's new?
Nothing. How are you?
Fantastic.
I'm so excited for the NFL draft. Feels like this is the last major point of the offseason before we get to football. But as we are learning, maybe football is going to be starting a little bit sooner.
Well, would you like to talk football, or would you like to carry over the conversation you and I have had behind the scenes for the last half hour? You tell me.
You're the captain,
no,
sir.
This is where the floor is yours. So I have to meet your neighbor. Maybe we just talk about this a little bit. Your neighbor Barry, T-Chains is all up in this as well. I cannot stop watching the Dr. Death documentary that's on Peacock.
Want to provide a little context here?
Dr. Death is a
No. I meant about the My Connection.
Oh, about Barry?
So, I mean, was it yesterday, 2 days ago?
Yeah, it's been a minute. Barry is your neighbor, and he is the, number one character or the number one spotlight person in the first, episode and a half. And so I watched this documentary, remembering that you had mentioned that somebody that Dr. Death worked on was your neighbor. I did not realize it was, my number one guy.
Top dog.
He's the top dog in the documentary.
Unfortunately for him.
But he seems great, and now I want to meet him. I feel like in a roundabout way I have met a celebrity.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the cool thing for me is that I get to meet him every time I see him.
Which is nutty. 50 first dates in real time, in real life. He has no short-term memory.
Yeah, it's very much like the movie Memento, which you clearly have not seen.
I have seen Memento.
You have. So the movie.
Baller movie.
Yeah, the movie goes backwards because the person has no short-term memory. And yeah, he's got a similar dynamic. When I first moved into the house, I met him, and my wife at that time was a big listener of the Dr. Death podcast, because the podcast was the first thing that came out.
Yeah, and so the lady that hosted the podcast is kind of another main character in the documentary. She's very involved.
So when I met him, he basically told me he has no short-term memory, and so he warned me that it would happen again, where he would introduce himself, and it was okay. And then basically a few days later, my wife was like, "Yeah, do you know who that is?" And I was like, "No," and she kind of filled me in on the situation. And yeah, I've lived in this house for 7 years. And he is kitty corner to me, so he's not directly across the street from me, but he's one house over. And yeah, every time I've seen him or talked to him, he reintroduces himself.
So how did your wife figure out that Barry from Dr. Death was your neighbor? She was listening to the podcast?
No, she knew about the podcast. Together? I think maybe, she had talked to another neighbor who had mentioned it or brought it up or something like that. 7 years ago, I could barely remember it happened. But yeah, it's the Dr. Death story is a crazy story, and especially for the Dallas area, where he worked at 3 different hospitals, and none of the hospitals wanted to basically come forward with what he was doing to patients, and so it just allowed him to continue to work on these patients in a very negligible way. And it was the first time that basically a licensed physician in the United States has had criminal charges brought against them for acts they've done as a medical doctor.
Wow. And I haven't gotten that far, so I'm still learning more about what this is. So this was back in the 2010s. It started in 2011. The depositions were in 2014. So it was basically a 2 or 3 year window where he was a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, between 2011 and 2013, he worked at 3 hospitals in Dallas, operating on 37 people, killing 2 of them and injuring 31 others.
And the person that he killed was like the fourth person that he operated on. And there were many, many more surgeries after that. And the whole case is, and again, I don't know like the end result from what happened, but I'm at the point where
he's in jail.
Is he?
You can figure it out.
That's good to know. He should be. Is he just really bad at his job? Is he actively trying to inflict pain and harm on these individuals that he has no connection to in any way? But I mean, the guy was making like starting salary for neurosurgeons in this area is $1 to $2 million per year. So the guy was making bank and had no idea what he was doing. And your neighbor, who they spotlight in the first episode plus, like he left, I call them like wood, like if I was building a deck type screws in the guy's back, just left hardware in these people's bodies. He paralyzed his best friend. It is nutty.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a sociopath. And, you know, we live in a world now where people love murder porn, and so he's like the perfect example of good murder porn, if you will.
It also has made me like rethink. I wouldn't just say trusting people, that's very vague, but it makes me rethink like how do you know that these people have the proper credentials?
Well,
and
I
when
mean,
I say people, just
you
people that are in
don't.
positions of power, right?
You don't. You're just hoping that, especially with doctors, the medical fields, that there's a system in place that would flush out bad actors like this. There'd be oversight, you know? I mean, yeah, look, I can't imagine Barry's living a very happy life. Now, look, he's outside. He can't work. He's always in tie-dye shirts, and, you know, I mean, I think he makes the most of it. But, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what his day-to-day is like and the pain and suffering that he's going through. It's awful. And clearly, like, this person should never be released from prison. And hopefully there's huge takeaways from this that allows for this to never happen again.
Well, Barry, your neighbor Barry, neighbor man Barry.
I got a picture, a screenshot at like 10 o'clock at night from James.
I was hooked.
This is how big of a deal this show was. You can't get James up past 10 for anything. For anything.
10:30, I'm popping off screenshots. Is this your neighbor? All caps. It's Barry from Dr. Death.
Yeah.
Well, Barry is an inspiration because he's had a terrible thing happen to him that was totally out of his control, and he's very upbeat and positive, and I just love his energy, making the most out of an awful situation.
Yeah.
How many times have you introduced yourself to Barry?
Countless. Yeah, I mean, he's outside a lot, and so if I'm walking, you know, it's like, hey, I'm Barry. Yeah, Barry. I know you. I've lived across the street for 7 years.
Man, it's so wild.
What I should do is, instead of saying that, just be like, hey, I'm Ari. I live across the street. I just moved in.
What, you remind him that he doesn't know who you are every time? Or do you just kind of play along?
That's what I'm saying. No, I'm always like, yeah, no, I know you.
Okay.
I should do the other way, though.
Yes.
Well, 1 year for Halloween, he always goes all out for Halloween. 1 year for Halloween, he dressed up as Dr. Death.
Oh,
and at that point, he was married to his wife.
Yeah.
They're no longer married. I have a feeling, because she was kind of upset with him about that he would make a joke out of it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? I love that attitude. You're right. Barry's an inspiration.
And, like, that's a conversation starter. I mean, if you're walking around as Dr. Death, well, who are you? I'm Dr. Death. Well, who's that? Well, the guy that kind of ruined my back.
Not kind of. There's no kind of ruined my life.
Yeah. Oh, man.
My brain doesn't work the same that it used to after having surgery through him. So.
What a story.
Yeah.
What a story. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, when the podcast came out first, which I think probably happened around the time of the trial or at some point, you know, maybe a decade ago, it has really taken off as a huge story, and I feel bad for the guy, for Barry.
Yeah. I feel bad for all of the victims. I mean, it's terrible.
It's terrible.
And just some horrific things. And then the cover-up, essentially, by the hospitals that he kept bouncing from hospital to hospital.
He worked in 3 hospitals in the Dallas area.
I drive by one of them every day, and essentially, like, they were scared that he was going to sue them for improper termination or whatever the official law jargon would be.
Well, I think they were also scared that, like, word would get out that they had this basically, like, completely sociopathic, you know, neurosurgeon, and so it was more like hush-hush. But, yeah, that allowed him to basically work for 2 other area hospitals.
Like the first hospital he worked at, they could have been on the hook for $25 million had they been sued and lost, because they would have had to pay out like his career earnings for essentially ruining his career. So they signed off. They didn't report it to the Texas Medical Board, like basically the database where these guys get background checked. There was nothing there. So he just went to the next hospital and said, hey, I've got a bunch of clients that need operations. Can I come work for you? And it was a cash cow for this other hospital that he was gravitating towards, and they were having money problems. So it was the perfect mix, just very, very calculated. Everything was incredibly calculated.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, again, sociopathic behavior in a way that we had never really seen before. Like, you think about, like, serial killers and people that do stuff like that, like, never in a medical profession in that capacity. And he was extremely inexperienced. Like, I remember seeing about, like, you know, he participated in, like, only a couple of hundred surgeries prior, and, like, normally for neurosurgery, you're talking about, like, thousands of surgeries that these surgeons are supposed to do before they, you know, become full-on doctors.
Man.
It's just funny that we're talking about this. You know, like, it's not like there's any new developments, or it's just that you found out that Barry's my neighbor and you geeked out like a crazy person.
Yeah, crazy's probably right.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
But no, I mean, it really is an insane story. And I know how much you and Taman love murder porn, so.
Well, it's not the murder part for me is not to downplay that.
Just small.
But for me, it's just the whole mental charade of what was going on with this guy. How did these hospitals, because colleagues of his, other real neurosurgeons, were reporting him and saying like, hey, this guy shouldn't be operating on people. And the board, these hospital boards were like, I'm sure it's fine. Like, he'll get the next one. We're going to give him another chance. 5 operations in, he's killed a person? Like, what?
Yeah.
I think the other thing to it is, too, when we've watched these murder documentaries before, we've never known somebody who knew a victim. And now we know somebody who actually knows a victim. That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that Barry is still with us. And, again, I just love his positivity in a terrible situation. So, Dr. Death is a bad dude. But you know who a good dude is? Arizona quarterback Noah Fafita.
Let's see how you transition from this one.
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
Great piece by Pete Thamel and ESPN. This is like a whole deep dive into Noah Fafita, who we've met and interviewed several times. Love his energy.
I mean, basically, to summarize, you know, while teaching a class for underprivileged children, he's saving cats from trees and volunteering and giving money. Like, he, you know, when we interviewed Brett Brennan a couple of weeks ago, he told us that he's coached a Pee Wee football team in the area for multiple years. Like, that's just like a side note to everything else that he does. He's, you know, the old saying of, like, he's the type of guy that you'd love your daughter to bring home. It's like, that's like, you'd almost be embarrassed for your daughter if she brought him home. Like, and he plays football? Like,
he is an NIL era unicorn. Guys like him do not exist.
And that's the ultimate story here, is the fact that he stuck out in this era with his talent level, multiple years at a school and multiple coaches, which says a lot about assumptions we make about this era and the players in this era, I think. Some wrong assumptions that we make. Certainly some act for money and opportunity alone, but Fafita acts through different means that are extremely admirable.
And he's a really good quarterback. And reading the comments from his offensive coordinator, Seth Dagey, who's been around a ton of really, really high-level quarterbacks from his time at Texas Tech. He was one of the all-time leading passers at Texas Tech, and he's saying there's nobody like Noah Fafita. And talking about, like, the first impressions that Noah made on him, number one, he's the active FBS leader in career touchdown passes. So on paper, he's the best quarterback in the country right now. First team all Big 12, first Arizona quarterback, honored as a first team all conference QB since the 70s. So there's several pieces. The loyalty storyline. He's one of only 5 redshirt senior or just senior quarterbacks in the country who have been at the same school for their entire career. There's only 5 in all of college football. He's one of them. And then just the stuff from his dad. He's a homeowner. He's a millionaire already in college. But then he continues to put his teammates first. Like he would post-game after big wins last season, he would say he didn't want to speak to the media because he wanted to open opportunities for the other guys who maybe don't have that chance and had a big breakout game to get their flowers and speak publicly. I just thought all of this was really, really cool.
This is a big year for Noah because he burst out of the scene, and then obviously he lost his head coach, offensive coordinator. He sticks with it. I think there was some talk about the potential for him to be an NFL quarterback at some point, but this is the year to prove it. Year 2 within the same offense. It's the first time, in his career he's going to have that. And so he's set up for a ton of success this year. Now he's got to go on the field and prove it. And if Arizona competes at the top of this league, which we think they can, and they're in it, to the end with Texas Tech and whoever else, it'll be because of Fafita, and I think he'll have a shot to get drafted.
Definitely. Yeah, he's a guy that we'll be talking about this time next year when we're talking about draft prospects. There's another there was a game last year where he used some of his NIL money, gave it back to the program, and asked them to get a busload of homeless shelter residents, take them to an Arizona game, covered their food, they got to go on the field with the team. And this is just one example of many. It was like a week-to-week thing for every Arizona home game. He's doing something for the people of Tucson. He is the ultimate, put others first guy, just super high character.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool profile. And again, anytime you've got Pete Thamel writing about you, that's cool. It shines quite the spotlight on the Big 12 and on Arizona football. And yeah, he's just an incredible dude. He's the type of person that I think some of the things he does you aspire to be, but you're not going to be all the things that he is. And that for him to be 20, how old is he? 22, 21 years old?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's unreal.
It's amazing.
I'm not that mature at 40.
We all want to be Noah Fafita. All right, the last nugget here in this first segment, the FBS Oversight has proposed a move to start the regular season on week 0. Future FBS regular seasons will be standardized to 14 weeks. This is from our buddy Pete Nakos, who's a regular from On3, during which teams could schedule 12 games. The season would begin on the Thursday of what is now a designated week 0 and end on the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
R.I.P. to week 0, the week that never existed.
Will we still call it week 0?
God, no. It's going to be called week 1, which probably should have been called the entire time. The funniest part about the whole week 0, week 1 thing is there is some point in the season where you stop referring to the week as the week number. So why did it even matter if we would have just called it week 1? Would it have been too confusing? Would it have been more confusing than calling something week 0, which is the absence of any numbers? RIP week 0. The big story here beyond just the hilarity of it ever being called week 0 is, this is a good move by college football, 1, because now it buys you 2 weeks before the NFL season starts. So the NFL has creeped in on your postseason, has added games during the week when they said for years they wouldn't. Now they've gone back on that, so now you're creeping up on their season. This is a time where training camp news is in full flux, where Hard Knocks is stealing headlines. I think this is a brilliant move. You get 2 extra weeks now of games basically before the NFL kicks it off. And then ultimately this is the precursor to the expanded playoff. This is the move before the move. When we talk about the schedule to get things lined up to where everybody ends by Thanksgiving, and then you can set up for an expanded playoff. So, we've heard SEC administrators, Greg Byrne, maybe the most senior of all of the SEC athletic directors, talk about, we don't need the SEC championship has kind of run its course. So all the talk and dialogue now coming from the Southeastern Conference is moving towards, an expanded playoff. We're getting it. It's just a matter of when and what it looks like.
And how many teams.
Right.
Dennis Dodd had a tweet just earlier this morning, a couple hours ago. He got his hands on the Fox and the Big Ten's 24-team proposal, and he says, this is going to happen. This is happening. And Dennis Dodd's usually pretty spot on when it comes to future predictability.
Well, and we're a month and change away from the spring meetings here in Frisco. We were there in Orlando last year, and expanded playoff was a huge talking point last year, and I imagine it will be once again this year, especially with more of, credible evidence coming out that it's happening.
Right. All right, coming up next, our full court review, Modelo's Big 12 basketball team recaps. We have started this series a couple of weeks ago. We're going through every single Big 12 basketball season, what they're doing so far in the portal, kind of summarizing what happened last year, strengths and weaknesses. UCF had a breakthrough year. They got to the NCAA tournament, lost in the first round to UCLA as a 10 seed. We touch on UCF today. It is Big 12 Radio. We are brought to you, the full-time fan, by Modelo here on TuneIn, and you're watching us on Big 12 Studios.
Arch Manning out to the edge and going nowhere. Logan Fano shows up again, this time in the run game to make it a 3rd down and long. Right tackle for Utah. Logan's not giving up. Logan is in there again. Back-to-back plays for Logan Fano.
Toss. Shaw can't get past Fano. It's going to bring up 3rd down.
5-man front. Caden Salter be ready for pressure. Again, here it comes, and there it goes. Another sack. Fano, Leia in a race to the quarterback, sandwich Salter down.
Not getting a lot of shots at offensive line. Pressure comes, picked up at least for a moment. Now Sims trying to get to the corner, and he sort of did.
Iowa State back in Boulder 2 weeks ago. Salter pressure, gets rid of it, and heaves it out of bounds. His running back Micah Welch was in the area, but it's pick your poison up front. Logan Fano applies it against
Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio, exclusively on TuneIn, powered by Modelo. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. Each and every day, the last week plus, we highlight a different Big 12 men's basketball team, season recap, and then what they're doing so far in the portal. And today we touch on the UCF Knights, who went 21-12. They went 9-9 in Big 12 play. Remember, 2 years ago, they were okay. They won 20 games. They went 20-17. They played in the college basketball crown. I think they actually won the crown. But then Keyshawn Hall transferred out. He was a 20-point-per-game guy, and everybody thought, well, that's the end of UCF. Well, without him, they were even better last year. 10 seed, get to the NCAA tournament, had the most conference wins since joining the Big 12 in back-to-back 20-win seasons. Their first NCAA tournament appearance since 2019, so it had been 7 years. I was impressed by what UCF did last year. And talking with a lot of the coaches in the league, like Johnny Dawkins is very well regarded as just a high-level basketball coach who coaches above his roster talent grade.
Yeah, I mean, we've already made our way through many disappointments in this series. Now we hit the major positive stories, and UCF, I mean, this may have been the greatest season of UCF basketball in their history. And, it was historic in many regards. I mean, first off, they were one of only 2 teams to make the NCAA tournament without any returning scoring production from the previous season. The Knights were in the AP Top 25 for the first time since 2019. They set a program record for points per game at 80.7. They shattered the single-season assist record and delivered 3 top 25 wins. So, again, probably very much so a historic season and probably the greatest season of basketball in the history of UCF basketball. But it was also in some ways wildly inconsistent. I mean, they beat a ranked BYU squad on the road by 13 in a game they're up by 40 at one point, and then lost to Cincinnati by 20 in the same month. They finished the season with 3 losses in the regular season, so they kind of crawled to the finish line. But a lot of positives to take away, certainly, from this season for UCF.
Yeah, at one point, remember they beat Texas Tech in Orlando after Texas Tech was on their heater.
Yeah.
And that win put UCF at 17-4. They were ranked in the top 25, and then they played Houston the next game. Then they lost at Cincinnati. Then they got upset at home against West Virginia. And after starting 17-4, they finished the season, 4-8 in their last 12 games. It felt like to me like watching them in the Big 12 tournament. They had that win over Cincinnati, but then I felt like they just kind of ran out of gas as the season went along. But the note you had, Miami was the other team, the only other team that made the tournament that didn't have any scoring production back from the year before. Well, this offseason, they do have some guys that were kind of role players that are coming back, at least as of now. So UCF is a really interesting case study because they had a lot of graduate transfers, like Themis Folks is out of eligibility. He was probably their number 1 guy last year in the portal, who ended up being a really good player. Riley Kugel had a big year for them. Now John Bull is the transfer that's 7'2" that they brought in from Ole Miss. He was their backup center, but was a really key contributor on the glass and as a rim protector. But they do have their one of their starters coming back for this year that I'm super high on in Jordan Burks, who is easy to identify when you're watching UCF because he wears jersey number 99. But Jordan Burks was a really athletic guy. He kept them in the game in the tournament against UCLA. He had several late game threes that gave them a chance until UCLA ultimately knocked them out in the first round. But if I was giving UCF a 1-10 score last season based off of preseason expectations, I'd probably put it at a 7 or 8.
Yeah, and it starts from this past season's success with Themis Folks and JaMychal Stillwell, 2 guys that transferred in from UW Milwaukee. Folks, he was the engine, and I think with Johnny Dawkins giving him credit, he knew last offseason that he needed more experience at the point guard position. That's what he got. Folks accounted for basically 38% of all production for UCF this year in terms of points and assists. And he became the single-season assists record holder for UCF with 222. Then JaMychal Stillwell became the first player in UCF program history to average a double-double for a season, which is incredible, finishing with 13 and a program record 10.7 rebounds per game. He had 104 offensive rebounds, the first 4 in program history to surpass 100 in a season. So a historic season again for UCF. And then you hit the nail on the head with 2027. I think there's a lot to like. John Bull is a guy that, didn't really start playing basketball until 2019. He grew up in Kenya, became a McDonald's All-American in the 2024 class. And at 7'2", he's big-time rim protector. And he actually was one of the most efficient shooters last year, scorers inside the arc. 81 of 112 on 2-point attempts. So he ranked 14th nationally for percentage of shots made inside the arc. And then you mentioned Jordan Burks. They also, they've added a couple of big-time players already in the portal in Caden Vasco from Wofford, who is probably their presumptive point guard. Started all 32 games last year, a big point guard, 6'6". And then Lewis Walker comes in from North Carolina A&T, who, he was an explosive scorer, averaged 19 points per game last year at North Carolina A&T. So I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off next year. I expect UCF to, again, contend for for an NCAA tournament bid.
Yeah, they were a sneaky team last year. Like, they had multiple top 25 wins. They were really tough in Orlando, highlighted by that upset win over Texas Tech, who was number 11 at the time. So you brought up Vasco. Love him. At 6'6", I imagine he probably plays the 2, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. But he was 5th in his conference in assists per game, but then he was 5th in the nation in assists to turnover ratio. Whereas with Themis Folks, that was kind of like the knock on him, is that he's a really dynamic catalyst of a point guard, but he struggles turning the ball over at times, trying to do too much. So I think Vasco's probably at the 2, because at the point, they have a guy who redshirted last year, Arturo Dean. Had no clue he was even on their roster. He was Oklahoma State's starting point guard 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was battling injuries or what, but they redshirted him last year when he was at Oklahoma State.
I think they did because of Themis Folks.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
But he was 11 points per game, 4 rebounds. He led the Big 12 in steals 2 years ago. He averaged about 4 assists, and he is like a hawking on-ball defender. He led the nation in steals when he was at Florida International 3 years ago.
Right.
So I love that kind of hidden gem that they've stashed to be their point.
Now, his one knock would be he's not exactly an offensive weapon. So
He's not a good shooter.
No, I think he's a career 26% from 3, which you don't have to be a great three-point shooter to be a point guard, but teams will force, teams can when you're one-dimensional as an offensive weapon, teams can make you, really expose your one dimension, especially in this conference. But, he's really interesting to see. Again, started point guard for Oklahoma State a couple of years ago, and my guess is because he's a senior, they didn't want to waste his last year in college behind Themis Folks. They also have a 4-star coming in Christian Gibson, who's one of the highest-rated recruits UCF's ever gotten. Kind of a late bloomer. He's 6'5", 190 pounds. Grew up in Houston, and in the Nike EYBL games, which is high-level AAU basketball, he averaged 21.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and shot 81% for the free throw line. So, he's a big-time player as well that they've added as a freshman.
I really like the way their roster's coming together. Isaiah Malone is another transfer from Florida Gulf Coast. They're bringing in a lot of mid-major talent from guys that are from the area. And Isaiah Malone is a 6'8" forward. He was the ASUN Defensive Player of the Year. He was top 30 nationally in blocks per game, and he shot like 40% from 3. Didn't take a lot, but he can make them. So he's kind of a stretch 4, which I think fits what we saw from UCF last year. Now, Jordan Burks, his return status is still kind of being sorted out. If he comes back, all of a sudden with him and Bowl as your starting 5, the recruiting class they have coming on, like Johnny Dawkins might be really building something in Orlando. Shooty Hoops currently has UCF as the 7th best roster in the Big 12 based off of their ratings system. So they've got some pieces. And, man, Keyshawn Hall, what a weird story because he was so good as a scorer 2 years ago, but UCF was better without him. He transfers to Auburn, and Auburn misses the NCAA tournament. Like, maybe Johnny Dawkins wasn't the problem.
Yeah, no, and look, Hall was a big-time weapon and scorer, but he's the type of player that, needs the ball in his hands at all times. And you can tell with UCF, like their fate with Keyshawn Hall rested on what he was doing. And there were games where that mattered majorly positively against Kansas a couple of years ago. But there were too many games where that didn't happen, and that's where he opted for more consistency. You know, Hall's a really good player, but problem is he's just an offense unto himself. And, you know, I think that's why there's some high risk, high reward with Keyshawn Hall. I thought moving on from him was the right move. In fact, Kansas was in on him initially, and I was hoping that they wouldn't bring him in, and I'm glad they didn't. But, again, he's a big-time scorer, big-time player. He's a train heading downhill with the ball in his hands. But the problem is the ball's in his hands all the time.
Right. And Lewis Walker, the kid from North Carolina A&T you brought up, is kind of Keyshawn Hall-like in that he led his conference in free throws attempted, gets to the line a ton, 19 points per game, shot 51% from the field, which is really good, but he's not really like a three-point shooter. He's like 6'6", 230 pounds. If you pair him with Burks, man, you've got a nice like combo at the three spot for UCF.
I mean, he had 2 33-point games last year, so like you said, he's kind of a, you know, there's definitely some Keyshawn Hall to his game. Yeah. I'm really excited about 2027 UCF. You know, it's funny because we've done these so far. I don't know how many teams we've done already, but like it's really been the bad teams we've done so far, the teams that had disappointing seasons, and now we get to some optimism, and it's like not only do they have a good season, I'm more optimistic about what they're going to look like next year than what they did this year, which says a lot.
Yeah, I think they're a tournament team once again. All right, Matt Murschel covers UCF for the Orlando Sentinel and Tribune. He's coming up next. UCF also just got a huge injection of NIL. I want to touch on that with Matt around the corner. He's Ari, I'm James, and this is Big 12 Radio.
Home uniforms, it's UCF, but it's the visiting 11th ranked Red Raiders who control the opening tip. Your officials today, Tony Padilla, Chris Pacey, and Tommy Johnson. Having a little bit of an illness issue, as a lot of people are during the cold weather months of college basketball season. Jordan Burks for three. Forced it up, no good. Another rebound for Toppin. JT's got 6 points, 2 boards. And Atwell has his second three of the day.
They have one of the most underrated ones in the Big 12.
Texas Tech knows all about March wins. Went to the Elite Eight a year ago. Lawan Watts out of the timeout. Tech's on it. Folks leaves it for Cambridge. High arcer off the window.
Good decision, just keeping the rock and going coast to coast.
Folks turns the corner with the left hand. Folks takes it himself from the left side. Could this be number 2? Toppin. Nice touch with the leaner. 27. 10-second differential between the shot clock and the game clock. That one was badly missed. And all alone at the other end, Johnson with the flush. And that will be the final points of the afternoon. Final score, UCF wins it 88-80. And for the second time today,
Our NFL draft preview from Saturdays to Sundays with TCU and Iowa State coming up in 15 minutes. But first, we chat with Matt Murschel from UCF's coverage for the Orlando Sentinel and Tribune. Full recap, our Modelo Big 12 basketball team recaps highlighting UCF today. And Matt, we feel like, I think we gave UCF a really high grade for this past year, being in the tournament. I know they were 17-4, end up a 10 seed in the NCAA tournament, but like compared to preseason expectations, felt like it was a really good year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree exactly. It was a really good year. Going into the season, looking at what UCF had to deal with in the offseason, they had, pretty much a mass exodus of players. They brought in 13 newcomers. Johnny Dawkins, head coach, brought in 13 newcomers to rebuild this roster the way it was, and then go forward and to finish, with 9 conference wins to get into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2018-19. Those were all the expectations that outside the program people were probably thinking were going to happen. I think inside they felt like they had a good chance. But to get to where they were, I think this was a success. I think it's a good kind of foundation to start to build on, as UCF continues to make its way through the Big 12.
Yeah, and the build on is a really good point that I want to touch on. But it starts from this past year's success, Matt, with the 2 transfers from UW-Milwaukee, Themis Folks and Jamichael Stillwell, who were just so dynamic and record setters for UCF. This was a record-setting season for those guys and for UCF basketball.
Yeah, those 2 guys were a huge part of what UCF wanted to do this past season. Folks coming in as the point guard, really kind of the engine that drove the piece that drove the engine really for UCF offensively. He finished with the program best assists mark this year, setting a record. And then you bring in Jamichael Stillwell. He was the guy that I felt like was the heart and soul of this team. When he was on the floor, this team really performed real well. He was a big-bodied guy, a big power forward. He'd like to come in and kind of, bang around a little bit in the middle. And the guy who was high energy, and that energy kind of transferred over to some of his teammates, and that's one of the reasons why UCF was able to make the kind of run they did. He had 8 double-doubles this season, and I don't remember in the last 4 or 5 years UCF having a player like that, someone who could really kind of step in and consistently build on that. So those 2 were a big part of the success that UCF went through this season.
Well, and I know Jamichael Stillwell is in the portal, a top 5 offensive rebounder in the country. He had like 25% of UCF's offensive rebounds for the year. But who else is maybe coming back, is in the portal? Where does this roster sit right now?
Well, it's been interesting. The UCF, have to replace 6 guys to begin with. They lost Folks. They lost their shooting guard, Riley Kugel. You mentioned Stillwell going in the portal. And then they've got good news the other day when John Bull, their starting center, 7'2" center, announced he was coming back. He decided to come back. That's a big part of what they want to kind of build off of. They've got another forward in Jordan Burks who hasn't made a decision yet, hasn't announced whether he's going in the portal or whether he's going to return. He would be another, big get for UCF moving forward. Carmelo Pacheco as a shooting guard that was kind of the 6th man last year. He comes back as well. And then they started building on pieces, going into the transfer portal. Brought in a center and Isaiah Malone, power forward center. Isaiah Malone from Florida Gulf Coast. Brought in a scorer from North Carolina A&T and Lewis Walker. And then they added another guard and Cade Vasco from Wofford. So, Johnny's really kind of getting back at it and trying to get some pieces to build some depth on and trying to build off that success. Once you go to the NCAA tournament, you can kind of use that cachet to go into a transfer's home and say, listen, we're very interested in having you come and help us continue with the success we've had. And so I think that's paying off so far, and I think they still have a few more players they'd like to add to the roster.
Jamichael Stillwell is trying to get another year of eligibility due to playing at the JUCO level for 2 seasons. I know he's entered the portal. Do you have any idea if there's a chance he could come back and what the eligibility situation looks like?
Yeah, it's just got to kind of depend on what, there's a lot going on with, court cases involving, junior college players trying to get, extra eligibility. Then you've got this, you've got the NCAA kind of studying this idea of the 5-for-5 plan, when it comes to eligibility. And I think Stillwell's kind of waiting on that. I'm not sure he got 4 full seasons, when you look at look at his record. And so it's not like he can claim, and there's no medical hardship anywhere, so he can claim he wants to get back. So if they could get him back, it would be huge. I mean, again, like I mentioned, he was the heart and soul of this team. If not, then they've got to find a way to kind of move forward a little bit and start rebuilding. But I think the good part so far for this team is they do have some players coming back. Unlike last year when they had virtually no production coming back from the previous season, this year they're going to have an opportunity to bring some of those guys back. And I think as I talked to Johnny during the year, the most important part about success, especially in today's day and age with the transfer portal, is just building continuity and also having some sort of culture being developed. And it's hard to do that when you're replacing 13, 14 players on your roster every year.
Yeah, and what did you say about Jordan Burks? Is he still on the fence? And then the other guy I wanted to ask you about is today I learned that Arturo Dean is on the roster and redshirted last year.
Yeah. The Jordan Burks is still kind of up in the air. He hasn't made any announcement yet. I think there are a lot of fans who are seeing that kind of as a positive sign because he hasn't discussed what he's going into the transfer portal or not. They feel like there's maybe a good chance he could come back. He was kind of one of their top 3-point shooters last year, so getting him to come back would be huge for the program moving forward. And then you're right, Arturo Dean joined the program late last year. He came from Oklahoma State. He was a guard that they feel like it's got a lot of potential. Then after the season, he re-signed. He's going to be a big part of what they want to do. His brother, Mr. Dean, who is a guard from Charleston, is also is committed to the program as well. So there's a possibility we could have the two brothers on the team, much like they had kind of had the last couple of years. So it's going to be interesting if they can get about.
Well, and Mr. Dean, which all name team, full stop, that's amazing. He was also really good at Charleston, and Charleston was coached by who's the old Xavier and Louisville coach? Chris Mack.
Chris Mack.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like a 16-point-per-game guy last year who's expected to be a backup. He's 6'6". Like, this is a really nice portal addition, too.
Yeah, very much so. And it's something they UCF really needs. Losing a guy like Riley Kugel, who led the team in scoring, they need someone to step up. They need to score, a slasher, somebody who can create when he's on the floor. And it would be a big plus for them, And I think they try to develop out this roster. They're looking around trying to figure out where some of these guys are going to fit. I think Pacheco, even if he's coming back, feels like a guy who's another sixth man who could come off the bench and kind of help out. Isaiah Malone, who played a lot of center at Florida Gulf Coast, he could be more of he's 6'8". He fits more of a power forward spot, so he could slide in if Burks doesn't decide to come back. They could bring him in as well. And then Lewis Walker's another guy that everyone's been very high on that scored a lot. He was a double-digit scorer, NCAA, and I think he's a guy that they feel like could step in and help out as well. So I thought that the John Bull coming back was huge for them. They needed that. They needed a power. They needed to get their forward and their center in. They needed to make sure that they have those pieces in place because that's really where they struggled last year. Some of their troubles were the fact that when John Bull would leave the game, they didn't really have a lot of size in that spot. So they're trying to look on the build on that.
What does the future trajectory of UCF basketball look like? Like, what's the facility situation? How much NIL do they have? Like, give us a sense here of what this looks like.
Well, the facility-wise, they've upgraded the last, a few years. They've pumped in about $12 million to try to upgrade the building and the arena where they're playing at, the Addition Financial Arena. They've done some upgrades to that. They've updated their practice facilities and their locker rooms, things like that over the last couple of years. I think it was woefully behind. When Terry Mahajer got here and to become the athletic director, he said first thing he mentioned is the program was really woefully behind when it came to facilities and upgrades, and so they were able to do that. Money-wise, NIL, again, UCF is probably in the middle of the pack, maybe in the lower end of things. Basketball wasn't really a priority for many years here. Football is always going to be king in the South, so I think that was the feeling on it. They've just started putting more and more money into basketball, I think, which has helped out this previous year. They're able to get some pieces, but they're also very limited. They don't have the budget of a Blue Blood. They don't have a budget of a Texas Tech or Kansas, so they're not going to spend $2-3 million, $4 million on a player. They're going to have to be a little more selective and have to do a better job of evaluating talent. I think it's one of the things that's been most impressive of what UCF did last year because I think they were able to get more out of less. And that's something that they're going to have to continue to do until they can find a way to maybe get a little bit more money to pump into the program.
Well, speaking of football, today will be spring practice number 9 during spring camp. How has the team looked?
The teams look good. It's gotten a little more mature. Scott Frost, when in year 2, he wanted to bring in players who had a little more experience, a more veteran leadership. Felt like last year that's where they lacked. At times when they were on the road, they'd find themselves behind or struggling. They had young guys and they needed more of a veteran leadership to step up. He's able to get some of that. the biggest question mark in spring camp so far has been the health of Alonzo Barnett, the third, the quarterback for UCF. He's a guy that has, came from James Madison, led the Dukes to the college football playoff last year. And he has been very limited in spring. Scott Frost saying that he's been dealing with an issue they're very much aware of, and they're just being very under precaution. They don't want to do anything to kind of jeopardize his health, and so he's been very limited in spring camp. So that's just opened the door for some of the backups to step up. But this is a team that's got a lot of potential. Feels like another year older. Just feels like they really do understand kind of where they need to be under Scott Frost.
And then last thing for me, did you ever see Malachi Lawrence doing what he did at the NFL Combine and his stock soaring ahead of the NFL Draft?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Malachi was such an interesting player here at UCF. He was here for 4 years, and that's a rarity. He's a unicorn in college football. A guy who plays 4 years at a school, and you saw him grow when he first got here to campus. He wasn't on the field right away. He had to kind of work his way into that, eventually becoming a starter. And you saw last year the potential. And I think that's one of the things that we asked Scott Frost about this, because we had him for 1 year, and Scott said, listen, to still continue to drive and thrive and try to get to where he is now just says a lot about a player who just doesn't accept the fact, okay, we've got coaching change and I'm just going to kind of jump in the portal. I'm going to do something. I'm not going to go as hard. He went hard out, and I think that's a great sign. I think that what he's been able to do over the last 2 months to get himself in position to where he's at. I saw Malachi yesterday at practice. We talked for a little bit, and he's excited. He thinks he's got a good opportunity here. There's a chance he could be a first round player, which would be huge for the program as well, obviously, to have him. But I think he's a guy who thinks that he can really kind of help an NFL team right away.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be awesome. Matt, great stuff as always. A lot of exciting things happening in Orlando. We appreciate your time.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Good to see you, Matt.
Matt Murschel covers UCF for the Orlando Sentinel and Tribune. They have a great transfer portal tracker on their website. He's all over spring football, and UCF, they're in a really good spot. Excited to see what their football team looks like this year, too.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting or puzzling that the defense wasn't better with having 2 draft picks along their defensive line as many years as they did, and then you consider that Lee Hunter was also a part of that group. It's interesting.
Yeah, really good point. All right, speaking of football, coming up next, from Saturdays to Sundays, Big 12 and NFL draft. TCU and Iowa State have a ton of guys that will likely get drafted, especially TCU. We're breaking down those two teams and their NFL draft outlook coming up next. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. We are powered by Modelo here on Big 12 Today on Big 12 Radio.
Without Richie Saunders. Away we go as the tap is controlled by Keba Keita. Played his best game of the BYU uniform Saturday. DiPazzo with those long strides to the rim.
He's just so slithery and smooth. He's seen so many coverages this year. They iced the ball screen right there. The big is not up to help enough. And then the beautiful finish.
See the UCF starters. 14 a game for Themis Folks. And they're going to need that. Jamichael Stillwell knocks down a 3.
But then when you close out hard to him, man, he puts the ball on that floor, 1 or 2 hard dribbles, and gets to the rim.
Jordan Burks, known for his shot from the perimeter at 39% and 13 points per game. Hadim Boop took it back. The energy man off the bench coughed it up. The Knights run. Burks in transition for 3. And this is the biggest remaining game these last few weeks of the regular season on their schedule. Underneath, John Bowles stayed patient. But you could tell what he thought of the importance of this game and the way that he spoke to his team today.
He talked about it being a war and how physical his team needed to play tonight.
Burks backs it out. Folks, shot clock at 4. Folks drives to the basket and scores it.
That's how you close it out.
They hit 14 threes. They put up 97, and they grab another marquee win in Provo.
Incredible performance by UCF.
Marshall Newhouse, former NFL offensive tackle and TCU alum, played at TCU from 06 to 09, will join us later on this hour because it's our from Saturdays to Sundays, Big 12 and NFL draft. We highlight offensive linemen today on Big 12 Radio and Big 12 Studios, but the teams that we touch on are TCU and Iowa State, and a long list of NFL draft prospects, especially for TCU and maybe even Iowa State, headlined by, I would say, Bud Clark for TCU, and then Dom Orange, the big nose tackle for Iowa State. I just pulled up a Bleacher Report 3-round mock draft, and it has Clark going number 67. It has Dom Orange going pick number 84, the first two off the board for these two programs.
Yeah, and I think there's a chance for 3 guys from these two schools to get drafted, and that would be Caleb Elarms-Orr, as well as Bud Clark and Dom Orange. Let's start with Bud Clark. Ball-hawking safety. I mean, the guy is always all over the ball. 3-time captain at TCU, and I mean, the heartbeat on TCU's defense these last few years. 35 passes defended, 15 interceptions in his career at TCU, which is one of the tops in the history of TCU's football program. And I think he's not just a really good in coverage or ball hawking. I mean, he can really fit the run well too. And so he's sort of a multifaceted safety, which is the reason why he's got a 3rd-round grade on him.
Yeah, he's got the most interceptions of anybody in this draft over the course of their career. The most career INTs of any prospect. He's like Ed Reed light. That's who he reminds me of. 6'1", 188 pounds, super rangy, could be as high as a 2nd-round pick, probably no worse than a 3rd-round pick. So he's a little bit feast or famine. He struggles with missed tackles. His missed tackle rate was 15% last year. He can be a little bit too aggressive at times, but he makes game-changing plays. I think about how he flipped that North Carolina game early in the year with that pick 6. He's been there for 6 years, a guy that stuck it out, made a ton of money in NIL, and now he's going to be drafted. 61 career games.
Yeah, he was flagged 4 times for pass interference in 2025, and he does at times have a tendency, because of his ball hawking skills, he can take some bad gambles at times, but the positives to me far outweigh the negatives. He also is an interesting story from the standpoint of, he originally committed to Virginia in that 2020 class, and then flipped to TCU on signing day. He was in the same signing class for Gary Patterson as Quentin Johnston and Savion Williams. NFL.com's Lance Zierlein, who's one of my favorites, is a draft analyst, described Clark as a, quote, coverage versatile safety in a cornerback's body with a talent to range over the top or man up on the slot. The size thing, I think, is also going to be a potential pitfall for him in terms of where he gets drafted, but I wouldn't let the size fool you. I think he's always played bigger than his size.
Caleb Elarms-Orr, the linebacker for TCU, had 130 tackles.
He's a tackling machine.
This past year, led the Big 12 in tackles, also had 11 TFLs. He had 4 sacks. He had 15 tackle games against Baylor and West Virginia. No TCU player had done that since 1995. Alamo Bowl defensive MVP. And then he exploded at the Combine. Remember, linebackers, I think, were the first day, and he blew up, ran a ridiculous 40. I think that led all linebackers, and so he's a guy that has skyrocketed. He could be anywhere from a 2nd, probably no worse than a 4th or 5th round pick, but he is talking to a lot of teams, the Colts, the Broncos, the Texans, the Panthers, the Vikings, all really high on him.
Yeah, he led Cal in tackles in 2023 and then became a backup in 24 after transferring to TCU, and then exploded in 25 with, as you mentioned, 3 games of 15-plus tackles. Yeah, you have to remember that Jacob Rodriguez did not lead the league in tackles.
Just amazing.
He had 3 more tackles than Jacob Rodriguez did. He also didn't play tackle football until high school and was not a full-time linebacker until 2023. So he's still extremely raw. But basically the first time he became a full-time inside linebacker was when he was at Cal, and he led Cal in tackles. So, he's got some raw talent, some things that are raw about him. But yeah, you mentioned he blew up at the Combine. Also, one NFL scout told Dane Brugler for The Beast, quote, he was the hardest worker on the team, big extras guy, film, lift, training, everything. So I think some of the negatives he might have in terms of his mediocre length and body power, especially in his lower half, is offset by some of those other things where he's raw, but he's a hard worker, and he's a tackling machine.
6'2", 234 pounds, Alamo Bowl MVP, Senior Bowl, he shined there. He's a big-time prospect. Nnamdi Obiazor is another linebacker from TCU who's probably going to be drafted day 3. Played in 12 games, had 81 tackles. He's a converted safety, so he needs to add some weight. But he had a really nice combine for TCU as well. He's a little bit undersized, as I noted, but they love his athleticism. The fact that he has that, like, DB background that translates really nice in coverage. A former safety, I would think somebody takes a flyer pick on him.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a guy that was a 0-star recruit, was not recruited coming out of high school, went to Iowa Western Community College, Community College, where he became a JUCO All-American his sophomore year. He enters the portal and joins, TCU as you mentioned, a nickel safety, and then moved to full-time linebacker in 2023. So extremely raw. I think he's going to go undrafted, though he could be a late flyer for a team that really sees that upside and likes what they see from him. And obviously he's got to have that size, and I'm curious where he projects to the next level.
And then the fourth guy for TCU that probably gets picked, we talked about him yesterday as part of our tight end package, DJ Rogers, who has come out of nowhere. He's had really nice measurables. He only had 30-some catches in that air raid offense, but 6'4", 250, fifth-year senior, ranked as a top 275 pick, could be anywhere from a 4th to a 7th round pick if he gets taken, originally from the Seattle area. But DJ Rogers is kind of an underrated, another TCU prospect.
Yeah, and another guy is Eric McAllister, who
McAllister, I forgot about him.
Was the only Big 12 player to surpass 1,000 yards in 2025, was named an All-American, and one of 5 FBS players at least 20 catches of 20-plus yards in 2025. So there's a lot to like about his playmaking ability. He does have 10 career drops, and he fumbled 3 times last season, so there's some issues there, which is a big reason why he's going to go undrafted. The other reason he's going to go undrafted is the off-the-field stuff with McAllister. He was arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and second misdemeanor count of terroristic threat causing fear of imminent seriously bodily injury in March of 2024. Pleaded guilty to the latter in August of 24, received probation plus mandatory, and then during that probational period he tested positive for weed. So, again, he'll go undrafted for that reason.
You think McAllister goes undrafted?
Yeah, for the off-the-field stuff. The
The
charges. The assault count was waived, but he did end up being charged with second misdemeanor count of terroristic threat causing fear of imminent serious bodily injury.
Man, he had 250-some yards in that win over SMU. It was like the National Player of the Week. Also 20 yards per catch for his career. It's just ridiculous what he's done, at least in terms of his on-field production.
He also left Boise State in the middle of the season to transfer to TCU in 2023. He was on pace to go over 1,000 yards in the season, and then basically just decided to enter the portal 9 games into the season.
All right, Iowa State. Headliner for me is Dom Orange. Great story, over 400 pounds in high school from the North Kansas City area. Was a 4-star recruit, and then everybody dropped off once they realized how much weight he had gained during the season. But he was a one-man wrecking crew for Iowa State. Projected to go top 80, top 90, third round-ish pick in the NFL draft. What are your thoughts on Big Citrus?
Yeah, I mean, he's a legitimate interior defensive lineman. He's tough to move. He's not much of a pass rusher. He's a run stuffer. But he's really good at that. He's a 2-time Freaks List alum. He's 450-pound bench, 650-pound squat, 34-inch vertical. And look, he's an impactful interior defensive lineman. But again, I think the standard run plugger thing, the fact that he's not much in terms of a pass rusher from the middle may ding him a little bit. But he's also extremely durable. He played 50 career games at Iowa State, just didn't miss time. So I think that's huge too. And where do they have him? He said 3rd round pick?
Yeah, projected to be 2nd or 3rd round. I would think 4th at the latest.
Yeah.
A lot of times guys that are projected to go 2nd or 3rd round, they can easily fall because there's so many prospects that are in that range of projected to be 2nd or 3rd round. But I would think no worse than 4th. The Steelers really like him. And again, he was 408 pounds in high school, so he cuts out fast food. He works really hard with the Iowa State strength and conditioning staff. He gets to campus at 350 and eventually down to 325. I think he measured at 322. So when you're 408 and you shed like 80 pounds, that feels a lot different on your body, which probably speaks to why he was so consistently on the field making plays.
Well, and we had a great interview with him during media days last year, and I mean, he basically was like, yeah, I was just a entitled kid, highly recruited, and didn't really, think too much of it. And then suddenly he looks up, and Ohio State's kind of taken away their offer, and he's left going to Iowa State, and he's become, a pro to a degree. The other thing about Iowa State is a lot of these other guys that we might have thought about would be draft prospects for Iowa State are now transferring to Penn State. Going to play another year at Penn State, including 2 safeties that got hurt last year that were big-time prospects.
Which are the safeties that are going to Penn State?
Cooper and Walker.
Okay, but not Jontez Williams.
Williams. I was thinking Jontez Walker. Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper are both at Penn State.
They're both at Penn State.
Yeah.
So they'll be eligible for next year's draft.
Pretty sure Jeremiah Cooper is, Jontez Walker. What's his name is?
Jontez Williams.
Why am I?
5'11", 200. He was probably like a first-round pick if he doesn't get hurt.
No, he went to USC.
Okay.
He ended up going to USC. And then Cooper Ebel was another one who went to Penn State. So
okay.
Ebel and Cooper are at Penn State, and Walker's at USC.
So is Dom Orange?
Why do I keep calling him Walker? His name is Williams.
Texas Ranger. So is Dom Orange the only guy that gets drafted for Iowa State?
I think so.
I mean, everybody's at Penn State or out of eligibility.
Yeah.
Jimmy Rogers, man, the deck is stacked against him just in this first year. I think he's still the right guy, but 70 players departing, all the studs going to Penn State. Iowa State's going to be, I think they're going to be feisty because they're going to be well coached and fundamental and disciplined and all those things, but an uphill battle, I would say, for them.
Well, and when you think about how many draft picks Matt Campbell produced, it's an alarming number, and I want to say they had a first-round pick last year.
They had early second, I know, with Jaden Higgins.
I remember it was a thing for a while that Iowa State had not had a first-round pick, and that broke during Campbell's tenure. I'm trying to remember, but I mean, think about the tight end target from Norman, Oklahoma, originally, who's in the NFL now. I mean, think about so many of these great players that came through Iowa State under Matt Campbell. Off the top of my head, there's just been a lot of really good ones, and so this sort of ends pretty significant era for Iowa State football, a historic era for Iowa State football, especially when it comes to this draft. It's shocking to see only Dom Orange. This is going to be the least amount of draft picks for Iowa State in a long time. So Jimmy Rogers, you're on the clock.
So Jaden Higgins was their first guy selected last year at number 34 overall. So he was like the second pick off the board in the second round. But then they also had Darian Porter. The long-rangey corner was drafted in the third. Jalen Knoll was drafted in the third. And then Jalen Travis, an offensive lineman, went in the fourth round. The year before that, they had one guy. It was 2023 that they had a first-round pick, Will McDonald.
Yep, there you go.
Drafted 15th overall by the Jets. But Xavier Hutchinson was a wide receiver that was drafted that year. Anthony Johnson, a defensive back. They've had guys drafted every single season since
TJ Tampa. Who's the tight end target?
Charlie Kolar.
Charlie Kolar, big-time player for them.
Breece Hall. The running back.
David Montgomery.
Man, they've had a lot of dudes.
And, I mean, they're all playing in the NFL right now. It's been a remarkable run that they've had, and, Dom Orange is the one guy. He's going to kind of cap this thing off, and I think Orange can become a very good NFL prospect.
All right, TCU, with all these guys that are going to be like day 2, day 3, early day 3 draft picks, does it shed any light on like why has this team struggled to get over the hump? 8-4 the last 2 seasons. They won their bowl game last year. But when you think about the last 2 years and like where those lack of top 25 wins have been for TCU, when you have Josh Hoover, who was the most coveted transfer portal quarterback on the market this offseason, and then all these defensive guys, it just leaves me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great point. I mean, TCU, I think, had probably a better year last year than maybe we remember, where they won 9 games.
Went 9-4 because they beat USC in their bowl game.
But they just had some head-scratching losses. And, yeah, you do wonder why this defense hasn't been better. I mean, especially with all the prospects that they have. I mean, Bud Clark is obviously an elite safety and has been. We knew going into last year he would be. Still a playmaker. I feel like at times it's like, well, they've had good pass rush and then they don't, and that was certainly the case last year.
And they've had guys getting drafted every year. They had 2 guys last year in Jack Besh and Savion Williams. And then in 2024, they had 3 guys
Johnston
get taken. In 2023, the year after that national championship appearance, they had 3, 6, 7, 8 guys drafted off that 2023 team.
Wow.
They got a lot of dudes. All right, coming up next, we touch on offensive linemen. That's the position group that we're looking at today. Marshall Newhouse, a former NFL offensive tackle and TCU alum, will join us in about 20 minutes plus from now. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. We are brought to you by Modelo here exclusively on TuneIn, and you're watching us on the Big 12 Fast Channel, Big 12 Studios. It's a fanatic Friday edition of Big 12 Today here on Big 12 Radio. Are from Saturdays to Sundays. Big 12 in the NFL Draft Series rolls on with offensive linemen today. This is powered by Modelo. Marshall Newhouse will be with us in about 15 minutes. But on the O-line is no longer just the offensive line. You have offensive tackles, you have interior offensive linemen. So piecing all of this together when it comes to top prospects can look very different, but I think it starts with Utah. Utah's got two guys that'll be drafted, probably both in the first round and maybe a top 10 pick.
Yeah, so the prospects for the Big 12 at the offensive line are very good at the top. And then there's a pretty significant drop-off in terms of expectations for the rest of the league. But they have 2 first-round picks, arguably, and Caleb Lomu could be a 3rd first-round pick. But basically 3 guys that will be one guy that will be taken in the top 10, maybe the top 12, and then 2 other guys that are for either day 1 or early day 2 guys. So very good at the top of this draft. And last year we saw a bunch of guys that maybe played tackle that were being projected as interior guys, and this year it's all about the tackles. Start with Spencer Fano, obviously, who we've talked a ton about this year. Started immediately as a true freshman at left tackle, and then when his teammate Caleb Lomu came in the next year, he moved to right tackle, which is probably more of his natural spot. But I think this is a guy that you can project as a left tackle in the National Football League. When Utah needed a yard, they ran behind number 55. Clear out the way, 55. And that's what he did. Also, he's got a younger brother, Spencer Fano, named Matayo, who is a 4-star offensive tackle recruit in the 2028 class, and he's got offers right now from BYU and Utah. So that'll be a really interesting recruitment to watch for. So another Fano is coming up the pike. But he's got a football family. He's got tons of cousins and siblings that played in the NFL. Karene Reed's a cousin of his who played linebacker at Utah and was an undrafted free agent for Denver last year as part of their defense. So he's got the pedigree. He's got the size. I mean, he's got everything you want at tackle, and it's the reason why he's one of the best tackle prospects in this draft.
Yeah, and it's nice to see the Big 12 not just sending skill players and Texas Tech edge rushers to the draft. It's nice to see a couple of offensive tackles going as high as Fano, who's 6'5", 311, and is a plug-and-play 10-year starter for whoever drafts him. He was a 4-star prospect out of high school, number 12 nationally at the tackle position, one of the highest-rated recruits in Utah history. And then he's on the field every snap. You mentioned the family football pedigree. Became the first offensive player in Utah program history to be a unanimous All-American. He won the Outland Trophy, Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year, had 357 pass blocking snaps, had just 5 pressures while allowing 0 sacks. And then what he did as a run blocker, Utah just had some ridiculous games. He also ran a 4.91 40, which at his size is elite for his position. Mel Kiper Jr. has him listed as the number 10 overall prospect. He lists him as a guard, so he could play multiple positions on the offensive line. The other is the 6'6", towering Caleb Lomu, a redshirt sophomore. He was turning heads at the NFL Combine. Out of high school, recruited by Michigan, Florida, Oregon, USC, Tennessee, lands at Utah. He's only 20 years old.
Started 24 games last 2 seasons at left tackle, so very durable. Obviously, something you're looking for in your left tackle. And a guy that did not allow a single sack across 357 pass attempts in 2025, earned a PFF grade of 82.1. So it'll be really interesting to see how quickly he comes off the board after Fano. But I like his ability to move in space. I do think he's got to add a little bit of weight. But beyond that, I mean, Caleb Lomu is as good of a can't-miss prospect as you can have along the offensive line.
Like, to have 2 tackles that were both on the field for 357 passing downs, and neither of them allowed a single sack is remarkable. And again, he's only 20 years old. So a redshirt sophomore, first year eligible to even be in the draft, he's going to be a guy that whoever drafts him, even if he's not on the field right away, like he has long-term longevity in the NFL. After that, it probably is on the offensive line, at least in terms of like the tackles. Enrique Cruz from Kansas is the next one that I see. What about you?
Well, Max Ihanachor is a guy that could sneak into the back end of the first round, maybe a second-round pick, early second-round pick. He only played right tackle, so he doesn't really project as being a left tackle, which is fine. But I think his ascension shows that he's extremely coachable and has the right attitude, which you're obviously looking for in a guy that you're trying to help him improve. He was born in Nigeria. He came to California at age 13, and he did not play football until he enrolled at East Los Angeles College. So, I mean, again, very raw. When you think about how much, in youth sports, specialization, and some of these guys that are big-time prospects. Like, yeah, they basically enrolled in JUCO and became a football player then after being born in Nigeria. Dane Brugler says of him, he comfortably weighs 325 pounds, so he's a stout man. Big thighs, trunk, and upper body build. So when you think about, okay, he's 325 pounds, really, really strong and bulky, stocky, and Caleb Lum, who's 310 pounds, right? So you see kind of the difference in terms of, like, guy who wears his size well versus a guy that probably needs to add a little bit of weight. Also, another guy that's extremely durable, though, 28 straight starts to finish his career. But, again, a lot of growth needed for a guy that just started playing football and just started playing the position. But I like him and his upside as a first-round pick. I think there's a chance he could be a first-round pick.
Yeah, great find. CBS has him rated as the number 31 prospect overall, which would put him late first round. An incredible find by Kenny Dillingham, East LA Junior College. You mentioned that he was born and raised in Nigeria. He was playing basketball and soccer. Like, those were the sports he knew. His AAU basketball coach said, hey, you might want to try football. And he enrolled in his junior college as a tight end. He wasn't even playing offensive line.
Well, and you could see in the film when you watch him his footwork as a guy that played soccer and basketball. And so, having that kind of footwork is hugely important at his position. Obviously staying balanced, staying squared up, not being knocked off the ball, not being knocked on the ground. I think it's some of the hand stuff. Again, some of the, just years of playing the position of experience will help with. So to me, the negatives on him are not exactly negatives. There's very much a developmental part of him, but he can also be a guy that you could start right away at right tackle, I think, in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the field for almost 500 pass blocking reps and didn't allow a single sack. He also ran a 4.9 140. He had, the CBS relative athletic score was like a 9.86, which was the highest among any offensive lineman in the class. So what a prospect. And then Cruz from Kansas, and then on the interior, that's where it's a little thin for the Big 12. Sam Hecht from Kansas State is expected to be, we talked about him the other day when we were highlighting K-State prospects. He's a guy that didn't allow any sacks in 2024 or 2025, so back-to-back seasons. That's across 1,600 offensive snaps. He had the fourth best PFF grade this past season among all centers in college football. Two-time All-Big 12 guy. He was first team last year and then second team the year before.
Well, and again, I love Sam Hecht as a prospect. As a Bears fan and somebody that covers the Bears as a draft analyst, I'd love for the Bears to draft Sam Hecht because they had, an all-pro center retire unexpectedly. Now, they've added some players to the position, but Hecht is the type of guy where if he's there in the third round, I think that's a dynamite pick for a guy that is going to be a plus-level starter at the next level. He's just a hard worker, guy puts his nose down and goes to work. And again, you don't necessarily pick prospects based on where they go to school, but I think when it comes to the offensive line, specifically the interior, guys that go to Iowa or Kansas State, there's a pretty good pedigree on those guys.
Yeah.
And so I'm the type where it's I'm going off the pedigree, and especially Connor Riley, he's the offensive line coach for the Dallas Cowboys now. So he goes from North Dakota State with Chris Kleiman to Kansas State to the Dallas Cowboys. That is an ascension that shows just how good he is as an offensive line coach and developer. And Hecht is a guy that developed underneath him. And again, a guy that, from a prospect standpoint, 0 stars, not recruited, and, basically is a flyer for Chris Kleiman because Ben, his older brother, was recruited by Riley and Kleiman to North Dakota State. So Love Sam Hecht.
And
Don't like that he went to K-State. Love Sam Hecht. And remember, the Bears had a center in Cody Whitehair.
Yep.
They drafted Cody Whitehair at K-State at center. So you could do a lot worse than Cody Whitehair and Sam Hecht.
yeah, he had a really nice career. And I kept saying Dalton Reisner, who is also still in the NFL and has had a really nice career. But it was Cooper Beebe, who was the center before Sam Hecht.
Right.
Cooper Beebe goes to the NFL, drafted by the Cowboys, opens the door for Sam Hecht to slide over and be the center. And
then who was the center before Beebe?
I think it was Dalton Reisner.
Yeah.
Dalton Reisner played every position.
3 straight centers. Right. I mean, Reisner, it's hard to call him a center because you're right. I do think.
Well, and Beebe did too. Like, that's the thing. All of these K-State offensive linemen, they come in, they play a little guard, maybe a little bit of tackle in a pinch, and then they're the center because they're the most anchored guy on that offensive line.
Yeah. Another interior offensive lineman that I don't think gets drafted, but I want to point him out, would be Bryce Foster from Kansas. He transferred from Texas A&M to Kansas, and look, he's 6'5", 310 pounds. He's got size, strength, athleticism. I think that gives him a higher ceiling. Again, I don't know that he gets drafted. He might end up being a UDFA, but that's what happens with some of these center prospects. There's such a value put on guards and tackles that sometimes some of these really talented centers can get lost in the shuffle. I think there's a chance he could be a 6th or 7th round pick, but Bryce Foster is a guy that I think could be an NFL starter at center.
Yeah, Foster and maybe Enrique Cruz. He's listed in like the 300s on CBS. He was honorable mention All Big 12, but he's a guy that, how much does he love football? Like, when he was in high school, he didn't even want to play football, and his mom made him. And then over time, it became his favorite sport. He balls out at Syracuse in 2023. He transfers to Kansas and had a pretty good year. He had a nice, relative athletic score at the Combine. He ran a 4.95. He was 23rd out of over 1,500 offensive tackles that have been evaluated since 1987. This is from Sports Illustrated, so
wow.
He's another, athletic freak.
Yeah, Kobe Baines is the last one, another guard from Kansas. So 3 Kansas linemen in this draft. It shows, the results haven't been there with back-to-back 5 and 7 seasons, but the amount of players that Lance Leipold has sent to the draft is remarkable and shows just how incredible Leipold has been at getting talent and developing talent. A lot of these guys transfer in as fringe prospects and then become NFL players. Austin Booker's a pass rusher for the Bears that transferred from Minnesota and has become kind of a cult hero for the Bears as a guy that continues to get better. Now we see Bryce Cabledew from last year. Lance Leipold, especially on the defensive and offensive lines, has gotten a lot of guys drafted, a lot of guys to the league, and this year there's 3 guys. I think one of those 3 will get drafted. I think it's Cruz. He's got the best chance to get drafted, but Foster and Kobe Baines are 2 guys that could as well end up on NFL rosters for this next season.
Was he solid at KU?
Yeah.
Okay, because I remember he was a highly touted transfer from, you said Minnesota, right?
Minnesota. The thing about Booker is he's not exactly a 3-down defensive lineman. He's more of a pass rushing specialist, edge rusher, which he was at Kansas too. So he's got to improve against the run. But again, sometimes it's okay to be just a pass rusher. That there's nothing wrong with that. It's not all edge rushers are great at setting the edge and being good against the run.
Right. The NFL, it's like it's like a running back by committee at defensive end. Edge setters, pass rushers.
Totally.
You got to have a bunch of dudes.
Not everybody's David Bailey that can do both.
Exactly. Latest Bleacher Report mock draft have him going number 3, by the way, to the Cardinals. He's number 2 or number 3. Seems to be the general consensus. So next Thursday.
Who picks number
awesome.
2? I know who it is. You should too. It's a team you don't want to get drafted by.
I know. The Jets.
Yeah. So hopefully it goes 3.
Yeah, 3 would be good. 2
Another team you probably don't want to get drafted by.
Definitely. Marshall Newhouse, former NFL offensive lineman, TCU alum, is coming up next to highlight the offensive linemen. Big 12 should have 7 or 8 guys picked in the NFL draft. It's our From Saturdays to Sundays series powered by Modelo. Marshall will be on the horn after this timeout. This is Big 12 Radio.
Quickly under center, and it is Daniels in for a touchdown.
Appearance, offset right, in the Kansas backfield. He'll take heat. looking for the edge and stumbling out of bounds.
7-1 to go. You mentioned on third downs. Here is the motion man. Daniels takes a shot downfield, and it's caught.
He's been through it quite a long time ago. He's here in year 6. Nice catch. Henderson off to the races with a vapor trail behind him.
The motions for Kansas. They're going to peck it. Daniels up the seam, and it's caught. Touchdown.
while we await Marshall Newhouse, who played in the NFL on the offensive line and was a stud at TCU from 06 to 09. Looking at the latest Bleacher Report mock draft, Kansas City Chiefs, 9th overall. Ruben Bain from Miami. Don't love it.
No.
He's got small arms. Tiny arms, dinosaur arms.
Yeah, which is the legitimate knock on Ruben Bain. But I don't know. The short arms didn't bother him when he was knocking over offensive linemen from Ohio State. I mean, he played his best in the playoff against NFL-level competition.
That's a good point.
So
you like it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset with Ruben Bain at all. No, yeah, I mean, the short arm knock is there, and there's also the stuff that came out about the traffic accident recently that could drop him out of the top 10.
Well, Andy Reid's not worried about that.
No, of course not.
I mean, the Chiefs.
If anything, it's a positive.
Yeah, that's what we do. We get these guys and we turn their lives around.
Yeah, that or
bad things happen.
Or it doesn't bother them at all, and there's no life turning around. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. Actually, it is here and there. I'm pumped. Like, the NFL draft is so awesome. Especially, I'll say this: like, day 2 to me is better than day 1. Because day 1 the first round takes forever.
Agreed. It takes too long.
But the one thing I'll say is this draft is so wide open. And when you look at it, like, there are a lot of good NFL prospects in this draft, but like the difference between prospects in the 20s and prospects in the 40s, like, there's not as much of a significant drop off. So it's going to be a very intriguing draft. And there's lots of depth at good positions, like we talked about Bud Clark. Like, he's a safety I like in this draft. I also really like A.J. Halsey, the former Houston safety who went to LSU last year and did not have a pass interference or holding penalty, had no penalties called against him in over 700 SEC snaps last year.
Insane.
And, I mean, he's projected as a third-round pick, second-round pick. So, like, yeah, there's just a lot of talent deep in this draft, which I think will make for a lot of trades and will make for just a really interesting few days next week.
This mock draft has Jordan Tyson going number 16 to the Jets. It says via the Colts, so not sure if that trade has already happened or some of these mock drafts, like, they build in trades.
Yeah.
They're so unpredictable. But then edge rusher Malachi Lawrence from UCF, they have going number 26 to the Buffalo Bills. So his stock continues to rise. They have your Bears taking, what do you know about Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker?
Yeah, a lot. He's like, and that's, again, going back to my point about, like, the depth between 20 and 50 or 60. Like, there are guys that, like, there's just a long list of guys that are mocked to the Bears. There's Peter Woods from Clemson, who's an interior defensive lineman. TJ Parker. Zion Young from Missouri is a really raw, athletic, talented edge rusher from Missouri. Keldrick Falk is a guy that there's a lot of variance from Auburn. He's another guy at a different level. I really like Gabe Jackas from Illinois, who is a guy that could be available in the second round. The Bears take at 57, or could be available at 30. It's crazy. And I think there's a chance the Bears, because of that, will trade down. And that's where you look at, like, who's going to be crazy enough to try to draft Ty Simpson in the first round. If there's a team that really likes Ty Simpson and they're desperate for a quarterback in a draft that doesn't have many quarterbacks, the 25th pick could be a spot where they try to trade back into the first round to get their quarterback, which would give the Bears extra draft capital, and especially if it's a team, the Jets, that draft at the top of the first round and second round that don't have a quarterback. Yeah.
Man, at pick number 29, because the Chiefs have 2 first-round picks, the Arizona State offensive tackle. I would be thrilled with that. Marshall Newhouse is on the horn with us, played at TCU and in the NFL to break down the O-line in the Big 12. Hey, Marshall, good morning.
Good morning. How we doing?
Man, we're great. How would you kind of classify the Big 12 collectively on the O-line? Like, is this a standout year with having multiple guys that'll probably go in the first round, highlighted by Spencer Fano from Utah, who's probably a top 10 pick? How would you just kind of evaluate the overall class?
Yeah, this is definitely an outlier year for the Big 12 as far as highly picked offensive linemen. You mentioned Spencer Fano and then his running mate, Caleb Lomu, and now this kind of late rising and Ian Achor. So you have a lot of guys who are on the radar who people are kind of going back and watching film, and I think putting a lot more respect on the Big 12's performance, and thus with the measurables, kind of rising in value. And we still don't know, there's talk. I do a podcast for the Raiders, and we're not sure, just kind of highlighting what the first round will look like, when there will be a run on tackles, because there's talk about Fano maybe being a guy that gets bumped inside, or, there's talk about fit inside the teams that are drafting, but the players are people that they want. But it's just a matter of when one of them gets drafted and it's triggered, is there going to be a run on tackles? Because we know that there's a lot of value, and there's really not as deep of a class behind them. So it'd be very interesting to see how this first round plays out. But the Big 12 is deeper than normal.
Yeah, we're going to double dip with you today, because not only was today Offensive Lineman Day, but we also talked about the TCU draft prospects in this draft. But for a moment, sticking back on offensive line, as somebody that's played the position at the highest level, like, what stands out to you about those three guys in particular?
Yeah, I mean, Utah's attack with Devin Dampier, they had a lot of they're very potent this year. And I think, you kind of take for granted when the offense is kind of humming at times, why that's happening. And we said leading in the year that those two bookend tackles would be a big part of it. But it seems like they were kind of unheralded more than I thought they'd be this year. And, you saw Arizona State have, kind of make a push there at the end, but they had some injuries that kind of didn't allow them to compete like they did the year before. So Ian Acho's, I think, impact was unheralded. But these guys are, to me, the draft process, if you're good and you perform, you get found. It's not like there's people that are leaving meat on the bone. These teams need talent. And so between those three guys, and then there's, players, guards and tackles, they started to see how competitive the Big 12 was. And, even though outside of Texas Tech, you didn't have a team that necessarily challenged nationally, BYU at the end there. But people started recognizing in this evaluation process just how deep the Big 12 was, and just how much talent there is to get.
Marshall, how much of, I guess, a plus is it for some of these guys that haven't been playing the position that long, like this offensive tackle from Arizona State, who his AAU basketball coach said, hey, maybe you should try football, because he was just massive, and he goes to his junior college as a tight end, like he's still really raw. So I guess what makes those guys so exciting for the teams that draft them?
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, there's excitement because you have the upside built in of like what he could be and what they can mold him into, but there's also risk, and so there's a balance of it for sure. And so you look at a guy like Iheanacho, or his arms and his feet, you're just like, man, you see the pass set and doesn't look like a guy who is so new to football, but you recognize that there's a lot that you can mold him to be a little bit more nasty, a little bit. He looks so technical when he's blocking. I mean, a lot of his film against David Bailey is coming out, and people are like, wow, look at this guy. Had a really good game against Texas Tech. And you see the talent, and there's teams that are drooling over it. But you definitely see, from my vantage point, a lot that can be dialed in. And so you see the upside for a guy who just hasn't had a lot of the mileage that football kind of brings on your body. And so I think there's a lot of excitement there with a guy like that. And teams are looking for this balance of production in college, but if you're a little bit younger than normal, or if you've got still some eligibility, that youth to them signals more value in the NFL. So they're always looking for a little bit of arbitrage. These teams, they want more value, especially if you end up being a first rounder. They get that fifth year option potentially as value as well. And so a guy who's played a little less football but still has produced, I think, screams someone that they can get their strength coaches wrapped around, and if they believe, their offensive line coach has a certain way of doing things, they can squeeze a little bit more out of you. And there's less bad habits that are ingrained in what you do. And so there's definitely an element to that. But to me, ultimately, it's about production. Everything, they're projecting a lot forward, but what you've done in college, they want to see what that looks like when they can build on top of that. And so there's a lot of guys that fit that bill.
Yeah, great stuff. What are the most important attributes for tackles when it comes to the NFL draft? Like, what are the things that the box you have to check?
specifically for tackles, especially if you're going to, be drafting them high, but, just all through the draft, there's a lot of them. And I don't know if there's, from team to team, you could ask them and they say something different, but there's a few that I think are pretty universal that in this modern NFL, there's just, you've got to, these are things that just have the boxes that have to be checked. And so in no particular order, it's about foot quickness. Can you keep up with just these elite, alien freak-like defensive end pass rushers? You got to get out of your stance. There's got to be a level of mobility and explosion because we know when I was taught, these guys are always going to be more athletic than us. That's not, in debate, but we have the advantage of the snap count and angles and leverage. And so you've got to be able to use that. And to be able to use that effectively, getting out of your stance explosively and getting to, quote unquote, your spot is a big, big deal. And then once you get to your spot, they want to see a level of anchor. These tackles, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", being tall is good, but if you can't bend and get low under these guys, then these guys learn how to bull rush you and one arm stab you, and they really manipulate their leverage and being lower than you. So can you bend while you're, using your quick feet and explosion? And then, there's a lot of talk about arm length, Ruben Bain as a negative, and then some linemen maybe as a negative. I think coming out 34+ inch arms, which was at only 6'4", was very long for how tall I was. And so I think that gave me a level of projection that I could fend off the defenders with my hand usage. And so they're looking for long arms. Now, if you have long arms and you don't know how to use them and they're not violent and they're just down by your side and you're catching guys all the time, then that's one thing that, maybe the level of coaching they want to bring out of you. They want to see you use long arms but violently and keep defenders off of you and pass off games and punch guys in the chest, really being violent with your hands. And then obviously there's the smarts part. I mean, the gap between left tackle and right tackle has closed as far as importance. It still is more important to have a better left tackle, but pass rushers are going both sides. Oftentimes in a game, they're looking for the weaker link, and they have freedom to move. And so if your right tackle is not up to par, then they will find him. They will hunt that matchup. And so being smart and being able to flip, if you're a young guy and there's maybe already established left tackle, can you flip and play right tackle for us and really learn that position, maybe until it's time that they want to move you to left tackle, or you settle into right. There's still a lot of right tackles that get paid. Lane Johnson comes to mind. Right tackle is just as good important as a position. And then maybe lastly is tenacity. Like, they want to see nasty streaks. Yes, sometimes you're pass blocking a lot and it feels passive, but one of my best offseason coaches was a guy named Duke Manyweather. He works out up in Dallas, has a lot of linemen come through. And what we always said is pass blocking is not passive. You are picking and choosing when you're being aggressive because you've got to be in balance, and we're trying to protect the integrity of the pocket and pass protection, but you want a nasty streak in pass protection. And then in the run game, they want to see you finish. They want to see your attitude. I remember talking to scouts now that I've retired, and some of them literally give guys points when they pancake a guy or they finish a guy late. They can tell it's pissing off the D lineman, and then they don't pick him up. They don't reach out a hand to pick up the defensive lineman. They walk back to the huddle. They want to see you be a jerk and protect your running back, protect your quarterback, and bring a level of attitude to the offensive line. So all those attributes, I think there's a balance of those things they're looking for in tackles.
Man, that's a great nugget. They want that tenacity. Love the alien reference as well.
They're getting better. It's unbelievable. I blocked the guys like Everson Griffin who ran 4.4s and Julius Peppers, and it seems like they're just getting even more and more athletic as the years go on.
Yeah, that reference is very on brand for our show as well. So you won a Super Bowl, played 133 games in the NFL. What advice would you give guys that are preparing to play in the league?
I think, it's funny. My draft process was a little chaotic. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I went and trained. I left Fort Worth to go train, and if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have stayed closer to home and just found somewhere where I felt comfortable and just kind of could just lock down and focus. But I performed well at the combine. I'm proud of what I did. But I just, I would have found a sense of normalcy, because they say that after you graduate or you declare for the draft, that is the longest year of your career because you're going from your last college season straight into training. I played in an all-star game. I could have played in 2 all-star games. And you go into the actual combine, you go into pro day. And then after the draft, you go into rookie minicamp. And so you rookie minicamp, and then you go to the team's minicamp, and then you go minicamp, you get a little break, you go to training camp, and then you're in your rookie season. And then your rookie season, there's almost every person, whether you play a lot or you don't play at all, there's a rookie wall, whether it's week 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now they got 17 weeks. And, I was fortunate enough to be on the Green Bay Packers my rookie year. We go on a Super Bowl run. So you're into the very last game. And I look up, and it's February 20th, and I haven't taken a breath. I'm weary. I'm just like, man, what happened? It was exciting, obviously, and I loved it. But you kind of have to take stock of how, legit this is as now your job, your profession. And so there's just a lot of guys that I think that adjustment's going to be huge. And so, the guys I do talk to who come out, I'm just preparing them for that, and just make sure they have a process, make sure they have their own sense of rhythm and the way that they go about things, taking care of their body. Because when you're in just like the middle of it, the muck, there's just no way to really understand what you're in for. And so if you have a process, you're just like, all right, well, I get up at 6, I go do mobility drills here, I did get my lift in here, I work on my kick sets here after practice, I'm watching film here, and you're just in your process. And so I keep guys reminded of the importance of that. And it's just it's a whole nother beast. And, it's exciting. It's an opportunity to change your life. And it's kind of a culmination of what a lot of guys have dreamed about since they were kids. And you don't want to mess it up. You want to squeeze as much out of it as you can. And I think my particular career, I'm so proud of it just because it took a lot of different twists and turns, and I stayed steadfast. And there's a lot of unknowns, and the better you're equipped to kind of deal with those unknowns, I think the more successful your career can have. Because sometimes a version of success could be 7 years and you got a second contract, or my career was 11 years. Some guys I know playing 15 years. And so deciding what success is to you and then going and doing everything you can to achieve it, I think is so important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, man, you should be really proud of the career that you had in the NFL. Hey, Marshall, where can our audience find all the awesome content that you're churning out?
I appreciate it. This fall, I'll be calling games again for TCU for TCU Horned Frog Sports Network. I also do a podcast with Ted Widd called the Just Win Podcast. We cover the Raiders and the broader NFL. I believe I'll be doing some more tune-in stuff, Big 12 preview stuff for the weekend, so you can find me there, and hopefully more places. So I'm just working, I'm enjoying it, and trying to do more and more football stuff.
Awesome, man.
Awesome stuff.
You're a natural. We appreciate your time. Marshall Newhouse joining us here on Big 12 Radio. Thanks, Marshall.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Marshall Newhouse played 133 games, 11 years in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the Packers, TCU alum from 06 to 09, breaking down the offensive line and everything with the upcoming NFL Draft, part of our Modelo from Saturdays to Sundays Big 12 and NFL Draft series. Due for a break. Coming up next, we take a look at the Big 12 basketball transfer portal winners and losers so far before Jamie Plunkett will join us from Horned Frog Blitz and 24/7 Sports in about a half hour. This is Big 12 Radio, exclusively on TuneIn.
Play fake. Hammond, sideline, back shoulder. Virgil twist to grab it. And in a hurry, Texas Tech is right in front of Arizona State.
6 on the left-hand side, starting his 50th game this afternoon. Looking long, it's Virgil. He's got it inside the 15. He beat Henderson again. But the defense with him. There he is. It's a deep ball. Left sideline. Dropping it right in for Virgil. Oh, what a ball from Darren Martin. To corral those defenders, they do a good job there. Reverse. Virgil. Reverse. There goes Virgil. Oh, yeah. A hop, skip, and a jump touchdown.
Throws over the middle, completes it to Reggie. Virgil's got the first down, still on his feet. And Virgil is going to take it inside the 35.
Goal. Morton with all kinds of time. It's caught. Reggie. Oh my goodness, what's happened to Virgil today?
Hammond, they throw it up top again. Now they're showing off. Touchdown, Reggie Virgil. Wow.
Big 12 today here on Big 12 Radio, a Fanatic Friday edition. Just put a wrap on our From Saturdays to Sundays Big 12 and NFL Draft series for today, highlighting TCU and Iowa State. Also went through some offensive linemen with Marshall Newhouse, former NFL offensive tackle and TCU alum. We went over UCF men's basketball team recap, our full court review in the first hour. And now we look at the college basketball transfer portal, and Texas Tech, according to Chris Level, got a dude yesterday with Cruz Davis, who's from Hofstra, averaged over 20 points per game, was the CAA Player of the Year, a big part of their postseason run because, remember, they weren't the regular season champ in their league. He heads to Texas Tech. This is Texas Tech's first big kind of splash transfer portal addition. We talked about Keanu Dawes landing with Kansas. We talked about Rob Wright going back to BYU. But I would say Texas Tech is like on the map now.
Yeah, and you know, our friend Matthew Postins from Heartland College Sports posted an article basically going through the winners and losers of the transfer portal so far, and one of them was Kansas. And it's hard to disagree, but I also think like it's early, there's still a ton of time left. Now, there's not much time left for guys to enter the portal, but there's a ton of time for guys to sign out of the portal. And, I think Bill Self and the Jayhawks are sort of waiting for the market to come to them to a degree, and Tyron Stokes as well. His decision will loom large over how they build. But, ultimately, I love the addition of Keanu Dawes. I think when you talk about replacing Bryson Tiller, who left and went to Missouri, Dawes is a better player and costs less money. It's an easy answer for me. Dawes, it felt like Tiller, he was really good at the front end of the year and developed, towards the mid part of the year, and then kind of fell off the map at the end of the year. Was not good at all. Borderline unplayable at times towards the end of the year. Was taking a lot of ill-advised shots from the perimeter. Wasn't rebounding at the same level that he was previously. So, unhappy he went to Mizzou, but I love the improvement that they've done there with Spencer, with Dawes. And then, you mentioned Cruz from Hofstra. Our producer, Taman Turner, can give us a scouting report on him, as he's a Hofstra alum. But, we talked with Evan Mia yesterday, and one of the things I think that was sort of alarming was he said, at this point, the output leaving the Big 12 is not as good as the output coming in, but it remains to be seen, what that will look like by the time this thing closes and it's all said and done.
Yeah, the team that I would disagree with on Matt, politely disagree, is he has TCU listed as a loser in the transfer portal. And I know that, David Punch has transferred out. But in terms of guys that they will retain next year, getting Brock Harding to come back at the point, Micah Robinson at the 2, Tanner Toolson had a major breakout month the last month of the season. He's going to be back. And then Xavier Edmonds. Like, how many programs would have thrown a bag at Xavier Edmonds? He announced he's coming back. He was a 20-10 guy the last 8 games of the season.
Did Punch hit the portal?
Punch is in the portal. He's going to Texas. Yeah, so I can see why he had them, because that's kind of the headliner, but they have a lot of guys that could have transferred out that didn't. Layla Vicious is transferring out. And the other little nugget that I'd bring to the table is the NCAA just passed this we're trying to figure out the eligibility stuff, right? Where for players it'd be 5 years to play 5 or 5 to play 4, whatever it is. But it puts
it's basically 5 years from the time you're 19. But I don't know if it's passed yet. Has it passed yet?
No, they're trying to get it through.
Yeah, right.
And so I read an article that, a lot of these coaches might be waiting on that, because if that does get passed, then all of a sudden it opens the door for like maybe a Melvin Council Jr. at Kansas or a Trey White at Kansas. And so they want to make sure that they have roster spots. It's just one more thing to manage and navigate during this incredibly hectic time, is that if I'm some of these Big 12 coaches and that gets passed through, you have guys that thought they were out of eligibility that might have another year.
Anytime you get a chance to wait on the NCAA to make a ruling on something, you got to do it, With that being said, as tongue-in-cheek as that might be, it does feel like they've done a better job of late in terms of expediency. But it's just a tough deal, right? Because the transfer portal's happening, and if you're Bill Self or any other coach where you've got the prospect of adding some of these guys back, like I like Trey White. If I'm adding either of those guys, I'd add Melvin Council, but I don't need to see another year of Trey White. I'd rather, like, there's Kansas is in on a freshman All-American from Toledo, who was a point guard last year. I think it was like a 30+% three-point shooter. Really good. Like, so I'm at the point where it's like you got to kind of move on, and retroactively, if you've got guys that can join, you got to figure out a way to make them, on the roster. But time moves on, and you can't wait around for things, especially when it comes to the NCAA.
Is this Leroy Blyden Jr.?
Yeah, he's apparently on a visit today or tomorrow to Lawrence.
Yeah, he's supposed to be there this weekend. Mac, freshman of the year.
Yeah.
6'1" point guard, 16.5 points, shot 41%
41%.
from 3.
So I said 30+. Yeah, 41% from 3.
3-star recruit out of high school from Detroit, Michigan. That would be a really nice get for KU. T-Chains, is Cruz Davis the real deal?
Yeah, he's a really good player. He's a combo guard. He's really fast. If I had criticism of him, he's not the best on-ball defender, but he's a good ball handler. I think that he can score at will at times. He can go on scoring spurts. I think Grant McCaslin's going to like that. And, he averaged 20 points. I know he's not going to do that in the Big 12, but he's one of those guys where he can, when he goes on a spurt, he scores. And his speed is a plus for him. Like I said, my only criticism of him is he's not the greatest on-ball defender, but perhaps with Grant McCaslin can help him with that.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a couple of points on that. Number one, when you're exerting so much effort on offense, sometimes they don't, they're not asking you to be a two-way player. And then obviously, as Tama just mentioned, like there's the schematic side of it. Sometimes, guys are in a bad scheme defensively, and so it doesn't fit them, or they've got other players around them. Like defense is way more of a football side where it's like you got to have 5 guys in cohesion defensively for an effective defense. Like there are some guys that are just great defenders, right? And then there's some guys that are just bad defenders. But then there's also context, I think, for guys that are sometimes one-way players because they, by virtue of you're not going to exert as much effort on both ends, and if you're needed on offense, you're not going to be needed as much on defense, and then there's the schematic side of it.
Totally. Yeah, no offense, Taman, but Hofstra's like, we need you to score.
Right.
Don't play any defense.
That was my first thought when he said that was, well, maybe they're not asking him to defend because he needs that effort on the offensive end. Again, Taman's watched him. I haven't watched him a ton. So
don't commit fouls, be on the floor, and get us 21 a game.
No, I mean, like Chris Lovell and I were talking about it last night. I mean, Texas Tech is getting a dog. I mean, he goes in. He loves to play basketball. He's a type of guy who is going to make your team better. Like I said, and when it comes to his on-ball defending, that's just my minor criticism of him. I have constructive criticism. He can get better, but yes, in Hofstra you need to score. They're a mid-major in the CAA. They're not the Big 12, so there's some things he'll have to work on. But ultimately, it's a big splash for Texas Tech.
Yeah, shot 40% from 3. The other team that's had a really
great
nice
scouting report by T-Shades, by the way.
He's all over it.
Thank you.
Cruz Davis.
Cruz Davis.
That's a sweet name.
It's a name that could go either way. He could be Davis Cruz. It's a 2 last name.
Those are my favorites. Big fan of those.
Got to watch out for the 2 first name people, but the 2 last name people.
I like both.
You like both?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
James. Huge fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that your cousin, LeBron's cousin?
Yeah. Baylor had a big week. So Baylor added Brett Decker from Liberty, 17 points per game. Shot 47% from 3, second in the country, behind only Milan Momcilovic. And he averaged 7 threes taken per game. So he's taking a ton and making a ton. Liberty's a really nice system. He's got 2 years of eligibility, and Baylor was dead last in the Big 12 in three-point makes this past year. So, it's a direct answer to that. And then yesterday they added a Penn State guard, Caden Mingo, who averaged 14 points per game in the Big Ten and started all 28 games as a true freshman. Scott Drew quietly putting together, I think, a much better class this cycle than a year ago.
Yeah, and one other guy that is rumored to at least be linked to Kansas, although based on the fact that he spent 2 years at 2 different Big 12 schools, I would say that anybody is potentially in the pipeline for him in the Big 12, which would be Mustafa Cham, who is the UCF Cincinnati transfer, who again has been linked to Kansas. We'll see. It's interesting, this big man market we've talked a lot about, where it's overinflated because of what happened last year, and you kind of read what's happening with lots of these schools in the Big 12 and how they're trying to build, and many of them want to get more physical, and it's not just based on the Final Four, but who just won the Big 12, right? Like you have to gauge who just won the league and who dominated the league and how they're playing, and you got to kind of match that style, especially if Arizona brings back those guys that gave birth to the style they played, if Koa Pete and Krivas and the physical front line that they have are back, then you got to try to match some fire with fire.
Even with all the Arizona departures, our guy over at Shooty Hoops still has Arizona as the second most talented roster in the Big 12, behind only, who do you think's number 1?
Houston?
They're number 3.
Who?
Iowa State. Keelan Torrey, all the transfers they've brought in.
Wow.
Jamarion Bateman, Plata, Blake Buchanan back. So they have 4 guys that were part of their top 8 rotation. But Arizona number 2. Now that still includes Koa Pete, because Koa Pete hasn't made his announcement. Tunde Yesufu did. So Baylor's one and done freshman, he's definitely gone. So we know that. But Karchinkov, expected to be back. Krivas expected to be back for Arizona, so they'll have pieces. Also, Evan Miyakawa brought up Oklahoma State and Kashi Nat, who he has as the number 1 rated transfer entering the Big 12, like in terms of efficiency. He's from Sam Houston State, or Sam Houston. He started at Southern University. Then he went to LSU Alexandria, which is an NAIA school in Baton Rouge. He was a 2-time NAIA All-American, won the National Player of the Year. Goes to Sam Houston, averaged like 11 points, 8 rebounds, 2 steals per game. Started all 34 games, but he is an athletic freak. He's like 6'5". He has a ton of SportsCenter top 10 dunks if you look him up on YouTube. Really nice, underrated addition for Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Jeff Goodman posted this about an hour ago on X, quote, "One high major coach, the field of 68 on the portal. I've long accepted that the chaos this time of the year is part of the job. We all know there are ways to improve it. Having said that, I do think it has added in a positive way to the offseason interest in college basketball, a similar way that free agency has helped the NBA. The biggest challenge these last few years have been figuring out what numbers are real or embellished when it comes to NIL offers when speaking with agents, which is why we have just reached out to other coaches and staffs we trust when we have heard they are involved to get the real numbers," end quote. So it's a great quote and a great reference of, like, there's a lot of complaining this time of year and there's a lot of things that are wrong, but the college basketball at the Final Four would kind of die in terms of interest until you get back to basically Christmas. But now, based on all these movements, free agency has really ratcheted up the attention that people are paying to the sport this time of the year.
It's an excellent point. It's extending the season, which is a good thing for college basketball. Coming up next, we dive into some Big 12 baseball. Jamie Plunkett from Base 12 Sports will join us before we wrap up the show with this could have been an email on this Fanatic Friday. Jamie's after this break. You're watching us on Big 12 Studios, listening to us, brought to you by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn.
Scrambling, throws across his body, and it's intercepted! The senior, Lander Barton!
In the pocket, free runner coming, he's drilled. Lander Barton right up the gut, hammered him. Utah doing this against a good run defense the last couple of years. Here, flies it in there to Lander Barton. All the defensive guys involved. Snowden and Barton both a touchdown. Blitz comes. Anderson's throw, it's knocked out. John Henry Daly got the ball out.
Back here on Big 12 today, powered by Modelo, exclusively on TuneIn, watched on the Big 12 Fast Channel, Big 12 Studios. He's Ari Timken. I'm James Westling. Jamie Plunkett from Base 12 Sports covers all things Big 12 baseball. Hey, Jamie, what's up?
James, how's it going?
And we're excited to have you on. Give us kind of there are so many great stories in Big 12 baseball with Harry Bonds, among others, but somebody new to the league, who are the breakout teams this year? What are the big storylines this season?
Well, I think the biggest breakout team this year is one that's currently tied for second place, and that's the UCF Knights. Year 3 under Rich Wallace, they've done a tremendous job of building up depth and talent on that roster, and he understands, because he's a UCF alum, former ball player down there, how to recruit the state of Florida. And so I think what Rich has done for the Knights this season in the past 3 years has been really good, and seeing them have some success has been really impressive this year. I know they're coming off of a weekend where they got swept by Kansas, who's probably one of the other big storylines. But I've been really impressed with UCF so far this season. And then I think just the general accumulation of talent in the Big 12 is another really good storyline. When you talk about Landon Hairston or Harry Bonds, as you just mentioned him, Quentin Coates, who got the nickname the Boogeyman of baseball earlier this year, Colin Ritchie, D. Kennedy, Sawyer Stroh-Snyder, like all of these kids across the league that are having great seasons, top talent in college baseball, high draft prospects, all the above. You start to look at the Big 12 as a conference that, while maybe it doesn't have the perception of the ACC or the SEC, is a fully talented and competitive baseball league in its own right.
Any shot for Landon Hairston to break Pete Incaviglia's 48 home run record?
Ooh, I don't know about that. I mean, we're talking about a different time period, different kind of bat, right? All the above. But I still think what he's been doing this year.
Will they pitch to him? That's the other part. Are they going to?
Lord, I don't know why people still do.
Right.
I don't know why people still do. Like, I mean, he went 1 for 4 yesterday against BYU, right? And it struck out to start the game. I thought Wayman Crane maybe had the best pitch sequence against Landon Harrison all season, and that's probably going to be the last time he strikes out for like 3 weeks or something like that. So, the kid's incredible. He's having a Golden Spikes level year. I hope folks recognize the level that he is playing at now is one that we have not seen. He has the potential to be the 7th all-time player to hit above 400 and have at least 20 home runs in a college baseball season. There have only been 6 players ever to do it, and he's on track to do that right now. So that's the level of play that we've been seeing from Harry Bonds so far this year.
Man, that's amazing. Kansas is a great story. They've won 11 in a row. You guys have an awesome Big 12 title odds tracker, but you still have West Virginia, even though KU's a couple games in front of them in the standings, holding a slim lead in terms of the Big 12 title race. So break that down for us.
So what that takes into consideration, obviously, first and foremost, is conference record, but it's also taking a look at how well teams are performing in a variety of categories statistically. So whether that's, team on base percentage, how frequently a team walks versus strikes out, both at the plate and on the mound. And in all of these metrics that we count, West Virginia is top or top 2 in the conference, whether that's in any hitting category or any pitching category. And so when it comes to the title odds tracker, one of the things that it starts to try and do is project out, okay, well, there are, X number of games remaining in the conference season. They are X number of games behind Kansas. Is it reasonable to consider that they would make up those games and win the league? And the answer right now is yes, just because of the overall talent and the overall level at which West Virginia is playing baseball. On the other side of things, Kansas is making up some ground for a relatively slow non-conference start. We had the chance to talk to Dan Fitzgerald earlier this week, and one of the things that he noted is when you bring in almost 30 new faces into your program, which they did this year, they brought in 27 new guys on a 34-man roster. It takes some time for guys to understand their roles, to develop that trust in one another, and we've seen that now over the last 3 weeks really for the Jayhawks, and definitely in this 11-game winning streak. So if Kansas stays on its current trajectory, I would not be shocked if they overtake West Virginia in the odds tracker. But the reality is those are 2 of the top teams in the league right now, and they're probably going to be duking it out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Jamie Plunkett joining us here on Big 12 Radio, does great work in covering Big 12 baseball. With Kansas and UCF being kind of surprises at the top, that means that teams we're used to seeing at the top in Big 12 baseball aren't. Kansas visits O'Brate Stadium this weekend to take on a team in Oklahoma State that's been one of the top programs in this conference for a long time, but they're 7-8. TCU is at 8-7. What about Texas Tech? Like, some of the firepower we're used to seeing in the Big 12 hasn't been as good this year. Give us a sense of why that's happened and who can turn it around.
Yeah, I think in the case of Oklahoma State and TCU and even Arizona to an extent, I think injuries play a pretty significant role for all three of those teams when you think about the fact that both Oklahoma State and TCU lost, and Arizona, all three lost major arms that they were going to rely on this year before the season even started. Oklahoma State lost their Friday night guy to a freak ACL tear. TCU lost Louis Rodriguez. Arizona lost Tony Pluta. Then you get into the season, and Oklahoma State loses Hudson Barrett. TCU loses Tommy Lepore. Arizona loses Easton Brayfogle and a handful of other pitchers as well. And the reality is as talented and as deep as those rosters might be, it's really hard to make up for lost production when you are looking at a roster that's shrinking, when you're trying to figure out how to develop talent from the high school ranks. And all three of those teams are teams that rely mostly on developing talent out of the high school ranks. So they're all young this year. We've seen sparks from all three of those teams this year. And there's definitely a chance that they can put it together. Oklahoma State, nice home series this weekend against Kansas to prove that. TCU on the road in Waco. Arizona hosting, I can't even remember who it is at this point. But they all have chances to do that. And then there's a team like Texas Tech, who I think their biggest challenge over the years has been retention of their top talent. You think about some of the guys that have come through that program and ended up at Arkansas or Texas or even other places in the Big 12. One of the challenges for the Red Raiders is, hey, if they're great at identifying talent. Can you keep it and can you develop it? And I'll be curious to see if they can do that with guys like Lincoln Garcia and Jesse Rusnick moving forward.
What's the story been with Arizona this year?
Injuries and just a significant amount of turnover. I mean, they lost 7 full-time starters from last year's Omaha team. And anytime you do that, it's going to be a real challenge, regardless of your brand, to be able to recoup all of that lost talent and perform at the same level. I mean, look at LSU and Tennessee, right? I mean, those are two blue blood programs who are going through some of the same struggles as Arizona right now, maybe not to the same extent, but then you add in the Pluta injury, some other injuries that they've suffered, and Arizona's a team that's starting 4 true freshmen pretty much every day right now. So I kind of identify them a little bit like UCLA in 2023. When you think about that Savage team and all of the freshman talent and wasn't quite putting it all together yet, they missed the tournament, and now 2 years later, they're probably the best team in the country and the favorite to go to Omaha and win the whole thing. So with Arizona, I think that's kind of the situation they find themselves in as far as the rebuild cycle goes, maybe expedited a little bit by some of these injuries. I have no long-term concerns about Chip Hale's program, though. That's an incredible school, incredible baseball team, and Chip Hale is a phenomenal head coach.
What are the series that you're most looking forward to this weekend?
Definitely the Oklahoma State and Kansas series, because I'd like to see if Kansas can continue some of their road magic.
Yeah.
They went on the road to Cincinnati a couple weekends ago and took a series. That one's really fun. Would love to see UCF get back on track at home against Cincinnati. That's another one that I'm going to keep an eye on, especially now that Matt Saucer has returned from his mystery injury. He threw a couple innings last week at Kansas. If he gets right again, UCF's definitely a threat to win the league this year. And then Baylor and TCU, I'm going to be down there in Waco this weekend paying attention to this one. These are two teams, first of all, obviously a huge rivalry. Second of all, tied at 8-7 in conference standings and kind of in different situations as programs, but both looking at this weekend as one that they really need to get. Baylor's trying to prove that under Mitch Thompson, they're rebuilding and that it's going well and that they can kind of move up into that next tier of Big 12 teams. And a weekend win like this would show that they're on track to do that. TCU, meanwhile, is trying to remind everybody that, hey, we were the preseason favorites to win this league. Yeah, we've suffered some injuries, but we're still pretty dang talented, and we're going to do that. We're going to go out and get a series win to kind of remind folks of that this weekend.
Jamie Plunkett does a phenomenal job with Base 12 sports, all things Big 12 baseball. Just collectively for this time of year, where does the league sit compared to last year?
I think it's in a similar spot. It's in a similar spot. probably right now looking at maybe 7, potentially even 8 teams making the NCAA tournament, which would be huge. The goal for the Big 12, I think, needs to be not only getting volume in the tournament, but finding a way to get 1 or 2 host sites from a regional as well. I think right now West Virginia is in prime spot to do that. Kansas is in a prime spot to do that as well. If 1 or 2 of those schools could get a host and the Big 12 gets 7 teams in, if maybe 8, I think that'd be really great. Right now, I think they're kind of tracking in the same path as last year, with the potential to maybe kick it up about a half step.
I'm curious for what you've noticed about pitching in the Big 12. Who are some of the the highlighters in terms of just the best pitchers you've seen so far?
Yeah, one of them's not going to pitch this weekend, and that's really disappointing. That's Coulter McAnally at Utah. He actually got ejected from his start at Arizona last weekend for saying some pretty unsavory things to the home plate ump, and earned himself a 2-week suspension. So he's actually out this weekend and next. But he's been phenomenal at the front of Utah's rotation this year. Cole Carlone has been phenomenal at the front of Arizona State's rotation this year. He's actually throwing today against BYU, which I'm looking forward to seeing. And then a guy like Maxiel, who's bounced around, started on all 3 days of the weekend, I think, for West Virginia at this point. He is the WAR leader for all pitchers in the conference, and he has been a consistent presence in that rotation for West Virginia, one of the big reasons that they've been able to do what they've done so far this season.
Awesome stuff. Jamie Plunkett from Horned Frog Blitz and host of Base 12 Sports joining us here on Big 12 today. Jamie, appreciate your time. Have a nice weekend.
James and Ari, thanks so much, guys.
You're the best, bud. Thank you. We're excited to have him on every Friday.
Base 12 Sports is legit.
By the way, if Kansas hosts a regional, I'm in. I don't know if you've seen how crazy the fans are. When you think about the support for Kansas basketball, and if we're being honest, we haven't seen that great a support for Kansas football. And some of that, I think, is attributed to just how big of a deal Kansas basketball is. What they've done for Kansas baseball is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And we talked with Dan Fitzgerald about that this week for Across the Conference, which is a show you can find on Big 12 Studios, and soon you'll be able to check it out on TuneIn. But one of the things he said was it kind of started last year with one of the fraternities came out and had a really good time, and then he looks up, and the next week every fraternity in Kansas is there.
I remember that.
And I mean, it's a party. I mean, it's a frat party essentially, but it's just the way that the student section has embraced this baseball team. And Dan Fitzgerald is a godsend for this baseball program. Just another incredible hire by Travis Goff. And I mean, my biggest fear is there's an SEC opening this offseason and Fitzgerald bolts, but hopefully not. And hopefully he'll be at Kansas for a long time because he's one hell of a coach. I encourage everybody to check out our interview with Dan Fitzgerald, the Kansas baseball coach, on this week's edition of Across the Conference. He is a very unique person and a very unique coach, and there's a pretty obvious reason why Kansas has had such an incredible and drastic turnaround in baseball. And I don't know if you want to come with me. I'm getting a group together. If Kansas is hosting a regional, I'm there. I need to be in the student section.
Student section. Let's not bury the lead. That's it.
It's a party. Let's go.
Yeah, they've been.
Wasn't in a fraternity, but hopefully they'll adopt me.
Who wouldn't? KU's won 11 straight, by the way. 8 straight in Big 12 play. Just took down UCF last weekend.
And then Wichita State this week.
Yeah. We'll wrap up the show with this. Could have been an email. We're bringing it back here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. He's Ari, I'm James, exclusively on TuneIn.
Pressure again off the edge. Wigman has Koziel. He's got room to run. Touchdown!
Great protection. Jump ball for his tight end. And he reeled it in. Wow. How about Tanner Koziel? Of Tanner Koziel on that play. Goes up in the middle of 3 defenders.
Oh, nice.
To the end zone. The tight end, Koziel. Touchdown, Houston.
True 6'7", he blinked, he didn't blink and said, absolutely he is. And when you've got that against a guy who, although isn't short at 6 foot, and Marquise Groves Killapoo, 6 foot 179, the red shirt junior transfer is no match for a guy 6'7", 257. You got reach on him, you got size on him, and a quarterback that can put it right on the spot. That's outstanding football.
Looking for 6 instead of 3. Wigman, touchdown! His favorite target, Tanner Koziel.
That one to the flat, he's going to be versus man coverage. Better double team this guy everywhere on the field.
Wegman back in the end zone. Tanner Koziel, 6'7", sure. What are you doing tonight? What a throw, what a catch. Tanner Koziel gets a soft cushion from DJ Pickett.
One final time here on Big 12 today, on Big 12 Radio. Heard exclusively on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. Have to mention our Mark of a Fighter podcast right here on TuneIn, courtesy of our good friends at Modelo. It is the Modelo Mark of a Fighter podcast. You can find it just by searching Mark of a Fighter. We pop right up. It's our life story basically in 15 minutes.
Tape and Turner, TJ did a great job in producing those, putting those together. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Go check them out. Just a different look at us behind the curtain. Different, just a different vibe.
Yeah, different vibe.
Vibe check.
That's well said.
Yeah.
Well said. I repeated a lot of things during my interview. I actually hate it, but it's fine.
What do you mean you repeat a lot of things?
I was not prepared. I was not prepared. And Taman was
Not prepared to talk about your life?
Yeah, pretty much that.
I didn't do enough research on this topic.
Taman was just peppering me with questions.
All these questions.
I just kept saying, that's a great question. So stupid.
It's a great question. Let me...
That's a great question, Taman. Man, these are great questions.
And then you repeat the question just to give you a little bit more time to think through it.
Stall tactics left and right.
Stop asking me questions about my life, Taman. This is very difficult stuff. I do not remember.
How dare I?
What are you, Dr. Death over here? Like you're just a fraud that hasn't done anything?
Taman was amazing, which, I should have been prepared for that. He's feedback back and forth. He's trying to ad-lib a little. And
I was here during the recording.
Just froze up.
At one point, James looked at Taman and goes, I will cut you if you ask me another one of those questions. Stop the recording. I'm cutting you.
Could we just pause? Time out.
What do you think you're doing?
So our show on video, we will have a little bit of a different look on Monday on Big 12 Studios.
Really?
Yeah, just a little bit of a different look, I'm told.
Are you getting a mohawk?
Might be a little bit different. I'm actually shape-shifting, so I'll be in like reptilian mode. But outside of that, the shot's just going to be a little bit different. It's just going to be a little bit different.
Aren't you always in reptilian mode?
Who is it?
Yeah.
Right?
You're just a chameleon, constantly blending into your surroundings.
Right.
Where's James? I don't even see him.
That's it. Shape-shifting. It's all the rage. Justin Bieber at Coachella, shape-shifting city, right? He's got reptile eyes.
What?
Maybe that should be this could have been an email.
The biggest stories in sports in the world that could have been an email. Some stories needed breaking news banners. These needed to reply all.
And what is your this could have been an email?
Oh, man, there's just so many.
So many?
Last week we highlighted the Diana Rossetti story that absolutely could have been an email, and I think we hit week 2 of that. Probably could have been an email. I saw this about Giannis Antetokounmpo that he won't, quote unquote, won't rule out a return to Milwaukee, which, yeah, Taman's laughing. We're all laughing at that. That could have been an email. Like, in the same way that AJ DeBonsa's not ruling out coming back to BYU, Giannis Antetokounmpo is not ruling out a return to Milwaukee.
Probably my favorite, like, hey, maybe I'm coming back of all time, was Zion Williamson from Duke. It's like, we haven't seen a player like that in 20 years. He's like, I might come back.
Maybe he should have.
Pre-NIL. Probably should have.
Oh, yeah. That was pre-NIL.
Yeah.
Duke paid him nothing. I could imagine that. Absolutely not. No way.
Sure he was, like, very transparent about getting millions and millions of dollars under the table back then. All right, I like that. I think my this could have been an email is, Taman, I have questions about your text messaging style.
Oh, boy.
Stylistically, like, does ChatGPT write these novel text messages for you that, I mean, they're in paragraph form. They're
like emails.
Very appropriately spaced.
This is actually the perfect this could have been an email topic because they are like emails.
Should be an email.
Yeah, it should be an email. Yep.
I write them.
How long does it take you to compile a single text message?
I don't know how long, but I will tell you this. The same criticism I have gotten from my wife.
You send her the same kind of text?
I do. Not anymore because we've been married for so long, but when we first started dating, she was like, it's way too long.
Major red flag. He's a bad texter.
Yeah, terrible texter.
Well, I just for your own edification here, James, he does have a Mac computer, so my guess is he's texting through his computer.
Or you're typing the text.
I wish that was the case. I write them on my phone. Like I said, I haven't always had a Mac computer.
All right.
I did this with my wife.
Okay, that's a horse of a different color.
Yeah.
We've got to talk. We got a problem. We need to have a.
Here's a perfect example. This was yesterday. It's first of all, you lead with "Hey fellas," comma.
Right, like it's an email.
That's an email. And then paragraph number 1, we have a paragraph number 2, we have a third paragraph, and then we have a close. All appropriately spaced, full lines between. This text takes up 85% of my screen. Just one text.
James took a look at the text, saw how deep it was, and chucked his phone.
Nope.
I'm going to start responding with TLDR.
Yep. Too long to read.
I'll give one-word responses now. Like, yeah.
Like,
Okay.
Okay, well, there's a balance there between one word.
I'm going to go from very, very long to.
I appreciate the detail-oriented nature of Taman, but more of the. Do you think TLDR means too long?
Yeah, too dang long to read, right?
Thought it's too long didn't read.
Oh, too long didn't read.
What with the D and not the T?
Like, here's the longest text I've ever received from Ari, and it's 7 lines. There's some dots between.
Mine's
dots.
probably 7 paragraphs.
All good there.
What was it?
What were you talking about? Let's see. Portal stuff, maybe? Oh, you were talking about, will Oklahoma State or Colorado have anybody drafted?
Yeah.
That was the topic.
Yeah.
That we were discussing.
Deep text.
And then we've got a lot of tweets between us. Man, we've got quite the thread going.
If you ever want a
I will
paragraph
say.
on that, just let me know.
I shall.
Yeah, this is good. Here's one with Taman that's, again, 3 paragraphs. Leads with, hey, fellas, comma, for tomorrow, comma, new paragraph. All spacing between.
It's the T-chain style.
So, yeah, we'll work on that. I thought you were just copy and pasting from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like, hey, send a text to the guys. Hey, fellas, comma, and then whatever it spits out. My other this could have been an email is that Colorado football is small. Their pregame tunnel clip that went viral from the spring game, everybody freaking out. The internet collectively said these guys are tiny. They're not going to win any games. Calling them like a Pop Warner-ish team. Maybe don't lead with your skill position players, guys between numbers like 20 and 39. Maybe aren't the first guys that should be coming out of the tunnel. And I get it. Colorado went 3-9 last year. But the guys that are never big were the guys that were at the front of the line. They have 14 players listed over 300 pounds. That's a real offensive line. They're going to be fine. They have appropriately sized players on their football team.
Appropriately D1 sized football players. Good year to buy Colorado low here at plus at the 4.5 over/under total. I know their schedule's tough, but they'll hit over 4.5. I don't know. Will they get to a bowl game? We'll see. I do project that they will, but I love to pound the over even if they get to 5 and 7. The other one that could have been an email is just this mock draft season.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a huge draft guy. Love the draft. Big into analyzing it. Can't wait for it. But it feels like when you've gotten to this point, like this should be the hottest part of the year for mock drafts, and yet I'm so fatigued by mock drafts because mock draft season starts so early. Basically, February is when it starts, and that's being generous, quite frankly, because it actually starts probably previous to that. But once you have the combine, that's when the mock drafts are fast and furious. I actually read that the most accurate mock drafter is a guy that writes for a smaller local paper, and he only does one mock draft, and it's the day of the first round. He releases one mock draft the morning of Thursday, the first round, and that's the only one he releases, and it's the most accurate.
How much accuracy are we talking about?
I don't have the percentages in front of me, but he's the most accurate of all of the mock drafters. But it feels like we've jumped the shark with mock drafts. You get the full 7-round mocks.
Oh, yeah.
It is. And then my favorite is the second cousin of that, which is the draft grades. They come out immediately, which is basically just which analysts liked certain prospects and then which teams drafted the prospects that analyst likes. So it's just recycling the same exact content over and over again.
I'll be honest, I love a 7-round mock. I'm a huge fan. I like to see like where some of the mid-tier picks are projected to go, where they might land. But with the first-round mocks, it never really accounts for trades. And if it does, the trades are never right, which throws everything out of whack. Like nobody can predict what trades are going to happen on draft day. So I'm with you on that.
And I think there's going to be a ton of trades this year.
Why?
Because of what we talked about earlier, which is, the talent drop. Basically, the talent anywhere between 15 and 40 is fairly negligible, it feels like. There's some high-end prospects here, but there's a ton of NFL talent that maybe aren't at the top end. Like, everybody you're looking at, basically, anywhere between 15 and 40 and beyond that, obviously. But like, there's some flaws in all of them. There's things to like about them, but major flaws. So I just think because I think the draft grades will have major variance amongst all of the executives. I think there will be some guys that some teams covet more than others and lots of trade down situations.
I also love draft grade season. But my personal grades, not watching and all the recaps from everybody else, but as soon as that draft is over, I'm ready to stamp a letter grade on it. I mean, I can remember like the drafts I was most excited about for the Chiefs. 2008 comes to mind. I thought that was the draft of the century. Total flop from Glenn Dorsey, who was the 5th overall pick, and then Brandon Albert, the offensive lineman. Chiefs drafted at 15, but they got Jamal Charles in the 3rd round. Brandon Carr started for like a decade. He was a 5th round pick, so it ended up being okay. God, the Chiefs had some terrible drafts. How about your Bears? Do you have any years that like stick out in terms of great drafts, bad drafts?
Oh, the majority of them are bad drafts. The majority of them are very much bad drafts, by the way.
Have you guys ever had a good draft?
Last year? Year before that? That's about it. Have you heard this story about David, the singer? 21-year-old TikTok to major label singer known for his single Romantic Homicide.
Is he a shapeshifter?
Basically, in September of 2025, a decomposed body was found in the front trunk of an abandoned Tesla registered to the singer at a Hollywood impound lot. The victim was 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. This week, after months of a grand jury investigation, David was arrested at a Hollywood Hills home, his home, and is being held without bail. It's David with a 4 for an A. That one probably could have been an email.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Not good. All right, coming up on Monday.
Yeah, probably didn't need to add that at the end of a Friday show.
Yeah,
I apologize to
Friday.
everybody.
We
did start with Dr. Death, so this is a good way to kind of full circle here.
We just bookended the show with a lot of really dark stuff. On Monday, from Saturdays to Sundays, Big 12 and NFL draft, we'll be touching on Arizona and Arizona State. They have a ton of prospects that'll be drafted, so that'll be coming up on Monday. It's kind of a wrap on an exciting week. We are, let's see, on Monday, we'll be 4 days away from the NFL draft. 4. He's R.A. Timpkin. I'm James Westling.
Why'd they make you laugh?
I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. Okay. Anthony Smith behind the scenes on the video side. Taman Turner on the audio side. We are out of here. Have a phenomenal weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.